lawsuits against two of the nation's largest producers of pet foods, Mars and Nestle, over failing to disclose the use of forced labor in their supply chains from the Thai fishing industry. New York Representative Carolyn Maloney also introduced legislation in the House last week to require businesses to publicly disclose what actions they have undertaken to remove labor abuses from their supply chains. She says, "There is no question that many goods being sold to American consumers are produced with slave labor, and we have a moral obligation to do something about it," unquote. A new study from the Center for American Progress and researchers from Harvard and Wellesley shows that the percentage of union members in an area is one of the most important factors for determining the future economic success of its children. CAP Managing Director for Economic Policy David Madland says these results both are and aren't surprising.
For those people who are union supporters, I think the results are not that surprising. I've had a bunch of union people come up to me and saying, "You're describing my life. My parents were in a union and they were able to work at a blue-collar job and help put me through school, and as a result, I've achieved this level." But on another level, the results are deeply surprising. There has been decades of research on economic mobility showing deep concern that the U.S. has lower mobility than most every other advanced country, fears that our mobility is declining, and no one previously had looked at the role that unions play.
It's not only children with unionized parents whose economic future is brighter as the result of a union presence.
Children whose parents were unionized do better on a whole bunch of outcomes. But when workers join together in unions and they have some power, they also are able to influence the politics of an area. Unions help make public investments. They push, for example, for a school system to spend more money to educate all children.
A unanimous jury on Thursday awarded more than $17 million to 5 immigrant farm workers raped and sexually harassed at Moreno Farms in South Florida. According to the lawsuit, 2 of the owner's sons and a third male supervisor engaged in graphic acts of sexual harassment against female workers in their packing house, including regular groping and propositioning, threatening employees with termination if they refused the supervisor's sexual advances, and attempting to rape and raping multiple employees. All 5 women were ultimately fired for opposing the sexual harassment. Unfortunately, the women are unlikely to collect any of the award, as the packing plant closed after the lawsuit was filed, and none of the men were ever arrested. Florida's Coalition of Immokalee Workers described the case as a powerful reminder of the ongoing epidemic of sexual violence in Florida's farming industry.
WIN made possible in part by the United Auto Workers and by the International Association of Machinists. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!"
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead, make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
This town gonna be here long after I'm gone. East side, west side, people don't surrender. They've been down, but they still rise on. Oh, and this time is my time. All right, love or hate, it don't matter. 'Cause I'm gonna stand and fight. This time is my time. She got her ups and downs, but love or hate, it don't matter. 'Cause this is my time.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks for being here today on the big program. Lots of things to get to, lots to talk about. Trade front and center, the TPP, oh my goodness. To be honest, the only thing that this should be good for is the first 2 letters there, just a bunch of TP. That's it. This agreement, not good for workers here in the U.S., not good across the globe, and we'll get to that. Also, is at the end of the Republican Party. Tomorrow, the big debate, the big CNN debate, 11 of the quote-unquote front runners They will gather on. They'll crowd onto a stage there at the Reagan Library and tell us how much they're like Reagan, when we will find out how much they are not. So very interesting stuff there. Also going to talk a little bit about misclassification of workers. Going to get a port driver from LA to come tell us about what they're doing, and also over to Philadelphia, where the education system struggling, all because 4 years of Republican budgets have caused massive holes in the school's budget. Now, the school in Philadelphia rated number 1 last year in the entire city of Philadelphia, the top performer. We'll find out what the Corbett budget cuts have done to them. Also take your questions, your comments, your thoughts, whatever's on your mind. 1-888-520-RICK, 1-888-520-7425. Election time coming up. The big one this November, and you got to stay focused on these. I know it's nice, it's fun, a lot of money being thrown in, a lot of glitz, a lot of glamour, a lot of stuff to get our attention with the Trumps and the Carsons and the crazies and all the rest of the the fun, if you will. But the real important stuff also, these quote unquote off year elections. We're here in Pennsylvania, huge one, historic. Chances are, and I can probably say this safely, we'll never see another election like this in our lifetimes. In fact, there have been generations before that never saw it. 3 Supreme Court justice seats up to be decided upon. And if you don't think the wealth class of this country is looking at Pennsylvania going, hey, we could flip Pennsylvania to be, the next Mississippi. All we need to do is take those 3 Supreme Court seats, and all of that ugly stuff that got passed in the past, the next time it comes around, we will have a court that will uphold it. The last time 3 Supreme Court justices were up for election, early 1700s. So this is a big one. And what's frightening to me, and this is one of those things that, I guess I pay too much attention. The New York University Brennan Center for Justice just issued a report today saying that they worry about our voting machines. They worry about the equipment being old, being outdated, and past, in their words, past its usefulness. As U.S. Elections Assistant Commissioner Thomas Hicks points out, we are getting by with Band-Aids, and he says, but I worry about a crisis with some of the older machines. Now, the report, titled America's Voting Machines at Risk, researchers found 43 states across the country using machines that are at least a decade old. They also, now understand, you go, it's a whole decade old. Wow, what do we do? As they've pointed out in this report, much like a laptop goes out of date after several years, the computerized voting machines do as well. The lifespan that they say for voting machines, about a decade, 10, maybe 20. But as I said, like a laptop, like a computer, you've got experts saying, with the outdated technology, you open yourself up to a whole bunch of hacking opportunities, a whole bunch of who knows what. And oh, by the way, a lot of the companies don't even make the parts anymore. So having these outdated machines with no parts, what does that mean? Well, it means that in the states that can't afford, or more importantly, the counties that can't afford to get the voting machines put into place, their votes may be at risk. Because as the Brennan Center points out, if a machine goes down, if one crashes, it could cause backups in long lines and all of that stuff, and people getting in, and delay people from voting, and maybe have them turned away at the polls because they don't want to wait 5, 6, 10 hours. Or it could even actually, and they're not 100% sure, could lead to deleted votes. So you could have come, you could have voted, you thought my vote's been counted, but the machine goes down, the vote's wiped out. The other part that they're saying with the security risks of these older electronic machines, the security flaws. Hackers can get into it, who knows what can happen. Look, if they can hack the Pentagon, if they can hack all of this stuff you don't think they can get into one of these machines? Now, what they say is, thanks to the Help America Vote Act, the idea was we would help areas buy these machines, and they did in 2002. It helped to upgrade it, but that was then. 2002. Think about 2002 as a whole lifetime ago, when the Republicans actually participated in this. In fact, Bob Ney, a guy we'll have on the program a little later, we'll talk to Radio News. He was the guy who helped write the Help America Vote Act, because there was this idea that maybe we should help people vote. Just kind of a thought. You look back at this, and I've been saying this from the very beginning. I am not a supporter of these electronic machines. I don't like them. I don't think they're secure. I don't think that they're something that we're going to be able to continue to use. According to this report, it's going to cost $1 billion to upgrade just to upgrade, not to, for the future, just the software upgrades, all the $1 billion in technology upgrades, which, look, we can't get Congress to fill a pothole. How are we going to get them to, in our interest, deal with our voting situation? Now, here in Pennsylvania, and I got to give them credit, Representatives Brian Sims, Scott Conklin, and Tina Davis have introduced a package of bills to help people vote. And help make it easier for folks to vote. Absentee ballot. I like that. Show up, you file an absentee ballot in person. I like it. Voting by mail, good idea. They want to have some redistricting reforms. Think not bad. Good idea. Maybe we stop having our elected officials choosing we, the voters, instead of us choosing them. And setting up an automatic voter registration system to where, you know what, you don't want to vote, you can opt out. But everyone's registered, and then we get away from all of this nonsense of, well, you didn't get there 30 days before, so you can't participate. Screw you. I think the easier we make it for folks to vote, the more inclusive we are, the better it's going to be. Now, I look at the Brennan Center report. Really big eye-opening moments. Personally, I think what we need to be doing, paper and a pen, magic marker, something. Ink blot. Remember Iraq? Ink on the thumb, ink on the finger. I voted. Remember that? Tried, tested, true. No hacking in, none of that stuff. You have people watch it from each side. Keep an eye on each other because we don't trust each other. And then we count the pieces of paper, like we did in the old days. And then if it wasn't right, you know what we did? We counted it again. And maybe we didn't get, results by 8:01 on election night. Maybe we had to wait till morning. Oh, imagine that. But I think that would help kind of with the legitimacy of our ballot. Because I got to tell you, I got a lot of questions with these electronic machines. And now with this Brennan Center report, I got a lot more. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. We're going to talk about trade, all kinds of stuff. I'd love to hear your thoughts, questions, comments. 1-888-520-RICK, 1-888-520-7425. You can also email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
I see them blue for me and you, and I say to myself, what a wonderful world.
Yes, it is all about the children, even after they're born. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1845. 5,000 female workers at the Allegheny Cotton Mill went on strike for a 10-hour workday. The fast streams around Pittsburgh and Allegheny City were ideal to power cotton mills. The mills were overheated and filled with dangerous dust. Many of these women and child workers suffered from work-related lung diseases. The 7 factories of Allegheny City employed about 1,500 young women. These women earned between $2.50 and $6 a week. They worked from sunrise to sunset. 6 days a week. Children made $3 a week at most. In 1843, factory owners cut wages even further. In the 1940s, a woman who had worked in the mills noted, "The ear filled with the noise of thousands of spindles." Anger over the deplorable working conditions grew. In early 1845, the women and children had had enough. They walked off the job and demanded a 10-hour workday and a living wage. Men supported them by gathering to protect the women from police attacks. After holding out for a month, the women began to return to work to survive. Some of the remaining strikers decided to try and remove the returning workers from the mills. They armed themselves with axes, but could not dislodge the workers. Public opinion turned against the striking women. Then, in September, workers marched on one of the largest area mills. The women broke down the factory gates and forcibly evicted the scab workers. The strike lasted for 6 months, but slowly, out of desperation, more and more of the women workers went back to the mills. Although the women did not get their demands, the strike drew national attention. On Independence Day in 1848, the Pennsylvania legislature put into effect a 10-hour day law. But sadly, the law had numerous loopholes and had no real enforcement. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm John Kerr. On Fox and Friends Sunday, Tucker Carlson and his fellow co-hosts voiced their concern that Stephen Colbert wore a Black Lives Matter wristband on his show, continuing Fox News' pattern of attempting to conflate the Black Lives Matter movement and anti-police violence. Here's Carlson.
So it's possible he's so, rich, famous, celebrity guy, so totally out of touch he doesn't fully understand what that represents. But here's my concern. Obviously, Stephen Colbert is a talented character, but there's also a strain of self-righteousness in his comedy. I don't think do you really want to get into this your first week on the air, diving face first into the most divisive social movement in America? It's the idea behind all the groups, and that is that you divide people on the basis of their skin color and say this one group of people's lives matter. Everybody's life matters.
Earlier this month, Vox blasted Fox News for pushing the myth that Black Lives Matter endorses violence against police officers, saying that the network is trying to blame the movement for inciting, quote, violence against police and civilians, despite a, quote, lack of evidence. For more on this and other stories, visit MediaMatters.org.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous. The salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME. We make Pennsylvania happen!
I will oppose the Colombia Free Trade Agreement. Now it's time to clear the way for a series of trade agreements. You can trust me.
From the Monongahela Valley to the Mesabi Iron Range, the coal mines of Appalachia, the story's always the same. 700 tons of metal a day. Now, sir, you tell me the world's changed. Once I made you rich enough to forget my name.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. So we've been talking about the Trans-Pacific Partnership Free Trade Agreement a couple of years now. Finally, it has the fast-track authority the president wants. There's a whole bunch of parts still moving. But at the end of the day, virtually everyone I talk to, not happy with it, not thrilled with the idea of a larger NAFTA, of a bigger trade agreement with the same bad, and some would argue even worse, principles. Now, we get that here, but how do other countries feel? Now, I was looking at the Philippines, for instance. If you remember NAFTA, the Mexican government had to go back and change their constitution to steal land away from their citizens so that they could sign the agreement, because that would be an unfair trade barrier, and we couldn't have that. Couldn't have communities farming and feeding themselves. As I understand it, In the Philippines, they would have to change their constitution to be able to sign on to this. And I can't imagine that they're all that thrilled. Here to talk a little bit about it, I've asked Bernadette Ellorin. She's the chairperson of BAYAN USA. They're one of the resistance groups that are fighting back against this. Bernadette, thanks for taking time for us.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So, we hear this frame, quite often. Everybody loves trade, right, Bernadette? It's going to raise all boats. Everybody's going to do better off. There are going to be better jobs for the people in the Philippines, better jobs for people in the U.S. Are people in the Philippines buying that?
Well, no. The government of the Philippines is more or less supporting that line, but the people of the Philippines feel something very, very different. And that's because the country is one of the poorest, in terms of the poverty line, it's one of the poorest in the Asia-Pacific region. And so the entrance of, if the Philippines does enter the TPP, it's going to be more poverty, period. It's going to be more misery, especially in a country like the Philippines. And in many other countries in the region, their main economic base is off of agriculture. And the TPP is basically going to destroy local agriculture, domestic agriculture, opening it up to the demands of the global market, which we all know is really not about trade and not about freedom. It's about hegemony. So also in the Asia-Pacific region, whenever there's a new neoliberal economic policy or new quote-unquote free trade agreement led by the United States, it basically means militarism, because neoliberalism means militarism. And right now, the Asia-Pacific region is the host of the largest global command of the U.S. Armed Forces, the Pacific Command. And so, and the reason why the Pacific Command is the largest and the most and the oldest of all the global commands of the armed forces is because the Asia-Pacific region is the largest export market of the U.S. economy. And that's why they have to protect their economic interests. They have to maintain economic hegemony over that region, which is what this pivot is about. It's really not about security or about defense. It's about securing economic interest, hegemony, at the expense of both the people of the U.S. and the people in the region. Of course, the people in the region experience it in a more life and death situation with regards to livelihood and their lives. People are resisting in the region at the cost of their own lives. Like I said, the life and death struggle in the Philippines is a very, very strong movement for economic and political sovereignty, and this movement is being repressed by the Philippine government because the Philippine government and the Philippine military, I should be more exact, are repressing the people who are really struggling against what we call the charter change, which is what you said, to change the Philippine constitution to be able to accommodate more to lift restrictions on the percentage of ownership that foreign corporations can invest in the Philippines. Right now, embedded in the Philippine Constitution are restrictions on foreign ownership of land and other public assets in the country, and so that's getting in the way of the Philippines during the TPP.
Right.
But President Aquino has signified on record that he wants to Philippines to join the TPP, and so is President Obama.
So you'll take that away, and much like the Mexican government had to steal land away from people, you're basically opening it up to foreign ownership.
Oh yeah, well, we don't even actually. There's a lot of illegal land grabbing happening in the Philippines every day by big foreign multinational corporations, and the Philippine government turns a blind eye to this because they make money off of the land grabbing of.
Yeah, they're on the payroll.
So right now, there's a big land grabbing happening all over in the Philippines, particularly in Mindanao, where the southern Philippines, where it's the mining capital of the Asia-Pacific region, and you can find everything there. You can find everything there as far as natural wealth and in terms of agriculture. Big corporate agribusiness is also land grabbing there at the expense of the people who live there, mainly indigenous, rural, poor communities that are, they're being killed because these these mining companies and these big corporations, they hire private armies to kill off or to displace whole communities in favor of setting up operations in their land and to, illegally grab their resources. That's what's happening right now. It's a human rights crisis right now, and this is all being supported by U.S. tax dollars, unfortunately.
But we're being told this is just about trade and jobs, and we're going to raise all the boats, Bernadette. Everything's going to be great. Haven't you heard?
Yeah, I mean, this is what the corporate media is feeding us. It's like the corporate media has their own interests. Their interest is to save the status quo. But the people in the Philippines, the people who are, kind of in ground zero of all of this, have a very, very different reality, and this reality is not covered in the news. In fact, what's happening in the Asia-Pacific region is not only is it not covered in the news, when it is covered in the news, it's very, very distorted. They're making it out to be about terrorism because there are terrorist groups in Mindanao, or there are, that is China. When in fact, this is really about increasing militarism and also to increase hegemony, and also to beef up what we essentially have as a war economy here in the U.S., a military-industrial complex. We have an arms race happening in the Asia-Pacific region now, in order to, and that's the justification that we're creating jobs, But what are these jobs? These jobs are not secure jobs. They're very precarious jobs. They're dangerous jobs. They're highly, highly contractualized. They're very, very deregulated. And, these are jobs that are very, very dangerous, and people are dying off of these jobs. So they're taking advantage of the desperation of the poor and grabbing the poor's wealth from their own land. So that's the reality in the Philippines.
Right. And it's like a lot of these trade agreements that we have. It's about exploiting desperate nations and desperate workers and really pulling everyone else down. But, some would say that the argument that we need to somehow fight back against China, because you're right, there is an arms war going on, and it's who's going to dominate in the next century between the U.S. and China and countries. And sadly, it takes me back to, my youth, when we looked at the Cold War in the U.S. and Russia.
Mm-hmm. Well, our position is that what's happening right now is the quote-unquote containment of China is being used as a pretext for the U.S. imperialism to increase escalate its geopolitical strategy in the region, with the TPP kind of as the economic centerpiece of this, to also economically isolate China. But Chinese aggression is happening, military aggression is happening. But I think, for the other countries there, we want to see diplomacy. We don't want to see more military aggression. And for the territorial disputes around the South China Sea in particular, those disputes need to be settled and handled by the countries in the region, right, in the territory, not by the U.S. The U.S. is not an Asia-Pacific country. So those territorial disputes need to be settled within the countries in the region, and the U.S. should not intervene.
Interesting. So as I look at this now, we're moving towards a time where our Congress is going to have to make a decision on this going forward, as are the other countries. Where do you see things going?
Well, I really think that the role that we need to play here in the U.S. is to really pressure and to really create a movement on the ground that's strong enough on the ground, and in solidarity with those movements in the Asia-Pacific region, including in the Philippines, that are also very vibrant, strong people's movements that are also fighting to stop militarism and the TPP in the region. These movements need to strengthen themselves, expand, and also be in solidarity with each other. We need to talk to each other. That's how we can basically make change. If we're fighting on separate fronts and not connected to each other, I think we do each other a disservice. We need to be connected to each other, which is why programs like this are really good to get information out.
Yeah, no, I mean, at the end of it, the reality is I still go back to the old Knights of Labor saying an injury to one is an injury to all. And if we allow the workers in the Philippines or Vietnam or wherever to be exploited and abused, eventually it comes back to us. in many forms. That's why, as I look at these agreements, I don't see anything good in them for working people. I see a lot that's good for huge multinationals and the handfuls that control our economy, but not folks like you and me, Bernadette.
No, I mean, I think we should also draw connections between the militarism that happened with the arms race in the Asia-Pacific region and the militarization here at home as well in the U.S. More and more people are going to be faced with, a highly militarized police force that is terrorizing our communities. So we have to draw those connections because it does come back to us. It is coming back to us already, and we need to recognize that, and we need to build strong, solid mass movements that are well connected and also very internationalist in perspective.
Excellent points. Let me ask you a last line of questioning. What do we do to stop this? I mean, there's so many voices out there that say, well, it's already done. Not much we can do. It is what it is. What do we do?
Well, that's definitely not what you do. You don't throw in the towel because it is completely hopeless if you throw in the towel. What's really inspiring is that there are people's movements out there, particularly in the Asia-Pacific region, that are actually, this is their life's work, is to fight these oppressive structures. So we should also communicate so we can also be inspired here to fight harder and to also learn from each other. We should go to the Asia-Pacific region and see for ourselves the on-the-ground conditions and what the people are doing, what they are building. So some of these resistance movements are amazing, and we need to know this. So we need to bring these stories back and uplift the voices of these resistance movements here in the U.S. to inspire us here to also fight harder, do what we can do. Because I'm not doing this because I think we're going to lose. I'm doing this because I think we can win. But it takes a mass movement. It takes an international mass movement to do that, and we have to have those. We need the international alliances, those broad alliances that link, unions to unions, workers to workers, peasants to peasants, students to students, women to women, across boundaries. So
no, that is the path forward. But we've been so in this country, and I think virtually every country, indoctrinated, trained, raised, whatever you want to use, to think in terms of borders, that it's always us against everyone else, and that our concerns can't possibly be the same as others on another side, that we want to win, as Donald Trump would say, win bigly. It's that kind of barrier that at some point we have to break down to realize that the workers in Mexico have the same concerns that we do with these bad agreements, and the workers in the Philippines and Vietnam, they've got similar concerns as well.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think the bottom line is we have to, as people here in the U.S., we have to come to terms that with our own exceptionalism as a country, and we have to break it down. We have to break down American exceptionalism that is basically paralyzing us from being genuine fighters for freedom. Because it puts us in a position where we have these very gross misconceptions about the world. And our role in it, our role in the world's problems, and until such time the people take back our education system, our media, even our local governments in different states, we have to take that power back and really undo all of that miseducation that's been stuck down our throats, and we have to break down American exceptionalism, because that's kind of one of the Achilles heel for many progressives here in the U.S. So I agree with you. All
righty, good stuff. If you want more information, you can go to the website BAYANUSA.org. We've got a link at the ricksmithshow.com. I'll have you get a little bit more information. Bernadette, I appreciate you taking a little time for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All righty. Have a good night. Let's take a quick break. Back with your thoughts. 1-888-520-RICK. 1-888-520-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show.
Gonna work on Maggie's farm no more.
Exposing that free trade is never free. The Rick Smith Show.
There isn't anyone immune from globalization. In fact, the confluence of greed and geography blends seamlessly over all of humanity. As the American workforce has become more sophisticated and smart, corporations have become less agreeable. Of course, there were numerous road signs that led to globalization, and at this point, somewhat improbable that any single cause could be raised from the economic wreckage it has created. However, 1976 may have been a high watermark for the American economy, where a change in the tax code emboldened corporations to move more operations overseas. Where these gutless entrepreneurs once shuttered factories in the Northeast and moved them to southern localities, they were now served up by the U.S. Congress, a world plate where even to their insatiable greed, the possibilities seemed limitless. The assault on American workers continued in the 1980s when the Reagan administration further retooled the tax code to allow foreign investors to set up American subsidiaries, thereby artfully managing the exodus of U.S.-based corporations. The unseemly alliance between Congress and corporations offers little solace to workers, but does shine a perpetual light on the misgivings of unregulated money flowing into the pockets of greedy politicians. Unions, while greatly weakened over the last 2 decades, continue to mount credible defenses, proposing balance, equity, and fairness for workers over the broader brush of Congress that would have us believe that globalization can regulate itself. This Rick Smith Show Labor History Minute is brought to you by a grant from the Labor Education Center at IUP. For more information, go to www.thericksmithshow.com.
Donnie Trump is said to be the goofiest presidential pretender in the GOP stable. But after all, he's a professional, made-for-TV stuntman. So his P.T. Barnum political shtick is no surprise. But the real surprise is that the flare-haired Donald is getting a serious challenge for goofiest of them all from an amateur practitioner of slapstick, Scott Walker. Only a few weeks ago, the political cognoscenti were hailing the sleepy-eyed Wisconsin governor as one of the, quote, serious candidates in the Republican herd. But he has since done so many splashy flip-flops on his policies that SeaWorld is reportedly trying to hire him to do backflips with Shamu. For example, he had previously been a quasi-sane Republican on the issue of citizenship for some undocumented immigrants. But when Trump surged to front-runner status as a flaming, maniacal immigrant basher, suddenly Scotty began foaming at the mouth like a mad dog, trying to out-bash Donnie. Yes, he yapped, Trump is right that we need to build a big old hermetically sealed wall on the Mexican border, but, he frantically exclaimed, we also need to build a wall across our northern border with Canada. Canada? Even Republicans hooted at such overwrought goofiness. As Rand Paul politely put it, that's a pretty dumb idea. So dumb that Governor Goofy collapsed into an addlepated heap of denial. I didn't say that at all, he barked a couple of days later. I've never talked about a wall to the north. Only he had. On Meet the Press, the national TV show. Walker was asked directly, do you want to build a wall north of here too? Rather than laugh it off, Walker declared with a straight face, that is a legitimate issue for us to look at. This is Jim Hightower saying, a 4,000-mile wall to protect us from friendly Canadians? Or maybe he wants to keep us from escaping to Canada if he becomes president. Walker is serious, all right. Seriously goofy.
What do the corporate powers from Wall Street to Walmart have in common? They hate the Hightower Lowdown. You can see why at www.hightowerlowdown.org.
From Sonoma County, California, this is Your World in 2 Minutes. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, with the Talk Radio News Service. Less than 10 miles from some of America's most prized vineyards, a pair of wildfires are plaguing this bone-dry landscape, causing California Governor Jerry Brown to declare a state of emergency. A blaze over the weekend in nearby Lake County devastated the small community of Middletown. The fire is being described by state officials as one of the fastest growing in California history. As of Monday morning, the fire had consumed 61,000 acres and was only 5% contained. Cal Fire officials are urging extreme caution.
If you live, though, in this region, even if you are not under a mandatory evacuation, you have to be prepared.
According to data from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, Lake County straddles Grade 2 severe and Grade 3 extreme drought. That's bad, but it could be and is worse not far away. 46% of California is considered to be in Grade 4 exceptional drought.
This has been a very important day in the life of the nation.
Australia has a new prime minister. Tony Abbott was replaced today by members of his ruling Liberal Party as they promoted his former opponent, Malcolm Turnbull, to lead the land down under. Abbott had caused division within the ruling Labour Party in recent months, including with a decision to prevent party members from being allowed to cast a conscience vote on gay marriage. Abbott's lack of concern over climate change policy had also singled him out for criticism. Turnbull previously took issue with Abbott's climate stance, but asked today whether to expect a major policy change now. Turnbull reportedly said no, and that the country's policies were, quote, very well designed. For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
The proud defender of the American dream, Rick Smith.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something in your mind, you can email me, rick at thericksmithshow.com. So, the big debate tomorrow night, CNN's big debate 2016. 11 of the 11 of the cavalcade of crazy going to be crowding the stage there at the Reagan Library. I'm assuming to say how much they're just like Ronald Reagan. They're not. But what's interesting to me is you look at the positions they've taken. And the question keeps popping into my mind, how much more can they isolate segments of the population? With Scott Walker's announcement yesterday that he would do away with federal unions and he would make the entire nation this no rights at work nation. What's he doing to that support? And, you know, at the end of the day, nationally, does this mean the end of the Republicans ever winning a national election? And that's why I've asked Dan Yankovich to come talk with us. He's written a great piece over at Huffington Post asking that very question. Is this the end of the GOP? David, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you. And, happy 10 years, by the way.
Oh, hey, I appreciate it. Thanks so much. The reality is we started this 10 years ago because I saw the Republican Party going in this anti-worker, anti-middle class, anti-sanity direction. And here we are with, honestly, when you have a caricature of a politician leading the polls, I got a problem with the party.
Oh, me too. Actually, the original title of my article was going to be the reality star candidate, and it was going to be about Donald Trump. And then I decided to look more broad at the whole situation.
So
what we have right now is a reality star candidate. He said it the other day. I'm here to entertain.
And that's not what I want in a leader of the free world, the most powerful nation in the free world. But here's the thing. I mean, everybody's angry. And this is where I've gotten to seeing why Donald is at the lead is he's kind of the anger candidate. People have been working longer and harder for less money. They're struggling to get by. That promise that we were told, David, that if we work hard, play by the rules, and we'd get ahead, well, that getting ahead part ain't happening.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what I talked about in my article. Since I think it was 1973, the average wage was $4.03. And adjusted for inflation and everything, basically that same wage today would be about $22. So what you're looking at is, our wages have only gone up like 5.7% over the last 40 years. While, you have CEOs and, the wealthy and all that. I think it was, I want to say the number is somewhere high, but it was like 937%. So, you work hard, you do your very, very best, and you'll get a 5.7% raise over 40 years. That's what you're looking at.
No, I talk about that in terms of just my life, David. I entered the workforce back in the late 80s, mid to late 80s. I started, my first real job out of college was working on a shipping dock for a trucking company. I was making $15 an hour with healthcare with a pension. Today, that exact job, more than a quarter of a century later, pays $11.82 an hour with no healthcare and no pension. That's not it's not economic gimmickry. That's no adjusted for this or that. That's actual dollar for dollar. We've fallen, almost $4 backwards in a quarter of a century, which is insane to me.
Yeah, me too. When I talk to people, I tell them, like, these aren't speculations. These are facts. Like with the cost of living, everything goes up. Every year my rent goes up, the gas goes up, everything around me goes up, but I'm not making any more money. And they're talking, about the economy's on the rebound right now and doing everything, but a lot of the jobs that are on the rebound in this economy are part-time jobs because no one wants to pay for healthcare. So they're putting out 97,000 jobs a month or whatever the number would be, but those aren't full-time, great-paying jobs. There's a lot going on with this, and the Republican Party. Every time that there's a minimum wage increase, they block it. Every time that there's a healthcare, anything with healthcare, they're going to block it. You have unemployment, they blocked. So, the party that's supposed to be for the working class and has all these working class people basically is blocking everything to give them any type of progress at all.
So if that's the case, and I think people are increasingly coming around to that position. Why is it that the Republican Party is even close to relevant, and why do they control right now the House and the Senate on the national level?
Well, you said it earlier, people are angry, and they're speaking to that anger. The Democratic Party, for all the things that they could be doing right, one thing they're not channeling the anger of the country. You have working class guys who are seeing people coming into the country and they think they're taking their jobs. The Republican Party tells them, well, you're not getting paid as much because we have illegal immigrants and there's stuff in the stores and there's this and that. So, the Republican Party is doing a better job at selling it. That's what it comes down to. They're selling it better.
Yeah, they're better at branding and rebranding and rebranding the same bad Reagan-esque ideas. And, you go back to, I remember growing up during the Reagan years being told, if we give the rich people all the money, that eventually some will fall out of their pockets and we can scurry for that and we'll all be okay. And we still seem to be following that same ideological bend of, if we give more tax breaks to the very wealthy, we give more tax breaks to corporations. They're the smart people. They know what to do with it, and then we'll be okay. Well, you know what? I think the mass of people realize we ain't okay, but we do have the largest billionaire class in the history of civilization.
Yeah. And, we also, you have all the money going to that, but that when you give the money to the wealthy and when you give them to the corporations, first of all, we've seen what they did with it, with the banking and everything, housing. But secondly, when they have that type of money, it doesn't go back into the economy. See, when they give a working class guy more money, it goes back into the economy because he has to pay his bills and he doesn't have $40 million sitting in a bank account somewhere. But you have somebody who's got, a couple $100 million, and they might invest some of it and have safety vehicles and do whatever, but a large majority of that just sits in a bank account. That's not doing anything for the economy. That's not doing anything to help everybody.
Or worse yet, David, you get these huge multinationals who we allow to park trillions of dollars offshore, and we allow them to take money out of the U.S. that we give them in tax breaks and invest in China or Vietnam or who knows where. And then be able to hoard that away from the U.S. That's a huge concern of mine as well, because what we're doing is we're basically sucking all the wealth out of this country and building something somewhere else that we don't control.
Yep. And then we're, buying debt from China and Japan, and basically they have, stock in the U.S. dollar then. So really at some point, we're going to have to look at it as, can we afford to pay our debts back to these countries we owe?
And really, that comes back down to our dominance in the world when you talk about the U.S. dollar being the reserve currency. Every dollar of things that we buy from China has to be brought back here. And you see constantly our corporations being bought. You see in fact, I was just reading a second ago that the president is meeting with the Chinese prime minister, and the president actually changed hotels because the Waldorf Astoria is now partially owned by the Chinese government. And they're not sure that it's going to be secure anymore for the U.S. president to stay in the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York City.
Yeah, the most iconic hotel that there is.
I mean, think about that. Think about what that says.
Well, I mean, that's the world we're facing. You know, we're basically in a time where, I mean, technology is as quick as thought. You have so much going on, and you have a president who has to run everything and make sure all the checks and balances are there. But, you know, things are getting missed, you know, and the working class, the middle class, the financial, you know, stuff that's going on. I mean, everybody's hurting. And, you know, with the new president, you know, coming through, it can't be Trump. You know, I have no faith that, you know, Donald Trump has any idea, you know, about any of this stuff.
And you're not alone, David. I mean, I don't know if you saw the ABC polls yesterday. You know, while a lot of people support him, the vast majority of folks, 60%, more than 60%, say he doesn't have the temperament, he doesn't have the intellect, he doesn't have the ability to be president, but it's the anger vote. I mean, we're still ways before this gets settled. Someone reminded me yesterday that in 2004, Dick Gephardt was leading the Democratic primary before the 2004 election. And everyone agreed he didn't have a snowball's chance. I mean, that's why when we have these races so far out, it's a fun game to play, but you know, the front runner's not going to be the guy the whole way, at least in my view.
Well, maybe not Donald Trump. You know, one of two things, in my opinion, is going to happen. Either Donald Trump is going to get closer to the Republican primary, he's going to be leading, and he's going to say, you know what, I have nothing to prove. I would have won the primary, and he just dropped. I could totally see him doing that.
I can too.
And then, or he wins the nomination, he sees who he has to face, and then he does it anyway. Or he runs and, you know, he gets clobbered. I can't see him beating Hillary Clinton. I can't see him beating, you know, Bernie Sanders. And, you know, both of them, I think he has a better chance of beating Hillary, though, than Bernie Sanders. Because, I mean, both of them are basically channeling the anger. Bernie Sanders, there's a movement going on. I mean, if you're on Twitter, every couple minutes, someone's posting something about it. You know,
feel the burn.
He's drawing. Yeah, I mean, he's pulling events with 30,000 people. I mean, those are bigger than Obama's crowds in 2008.
And the thing is our mainstream corporate-controlled media is not covering it. That's the thing that gets me.
Yeah, but they're covering Hillary. Yesterday, she came out and she said that she thought about Bill Clinton as her VP, which, first off, is complete BS. I mean, it's unconstitutional. He can't be your vice president. But second, you know, she's just trying to do that for political maneuvering to get some points, you know.
Well,
the same thing is.
I don't know why you would do that. To me, Julian Castro should be her VP. That simple. But, you know,
or she really wanted to go for, you know, the liberal vote, you know, call Warren up.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. You would need, from a political observer's point, you need a Hispanic, you need someone in the Latino community to tie on so that you solidify that vote. At least that's my thought in it. But, you know, because you don't need another white woman.
No, I definitely agree with you there. I mean, the Latino vote is the largest block of voters that are coming out. The Republican Party is alienating them. If Trump gets the nomination, they're pretty much going to get probably 3% of the actual vote of them. You know, after what he said about Mexico and, you know, the things he's done there. And then after what he's saying about women, you know, I read something online that he's leading the white women's vote for the Republican Party. But among everybody else, he's got like 16%.
Right.
When it's, you know, for women.
Which tells you how many women are Republicans. How many Phyllis Schlaflys can be out there?
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's in trouble. The Republican Party in general is in trouble. Now, nationally, they're going to pick up the House races and the Senate races because people are mad and, you know, there are politicians speaking to their issues. But nationally, there's too many intellectuals. You know, Texas is a Republican red state. It has been for 40 years. And slowly, you know, it's going to turn blue. You're going to have more immigrants pouring into Mexico. And pretty soon, they're not going to have that to hold on to. So what are they going to do with those 34 electoral votes?
That's a good question. But I would argue that they're holding on to the House purely by the massive gerrymandering that's gone on that happened in 2010. I don't see them holding the Senate this next year because they've got the same, I think it's 24-10. That the Democrats had last time, 23-10 seats to defend. But in looking at this, and I think you've hit on a bunch of things, David, that are really important. That the Republican Party really has cornered themselves into the mold of the old angry white guy. People my age and older who are ticked off that everything they were told has turned out to not be quite so, and they've alienated the immigrant population, they've alienated women, they've alienated young people by saddling them with massive debts and saying, well, you know what, we're not going to bother helping you. At what point does the party then start coming back to sanity? Because, you know, I was thinking about Dwight David Eisenhower the other day, and I don't know if you've seen this quote that he wrote to his brother Edgar. about any party coming out against Social Security or unemployment or labor laws, that they would never, if there were any of those in the party, they wouldn't be heard from. There are a couple, but their numbers were negligible, and they are stupid. And the sad reality is, stupid seems to be running the GOP right now.
Yeah. I have heard that quote, but I read the definition of fascism the other day, and it was extreme far right will not hear other opinions or views. And I was thinking about it, and the Republicans call, the Democratic Party liberal, and that's kind of become like a dirty word. But really, I mean, the dirty word that the liberals should be slanging at them is fascist.
See, but once you start doing that, then you get sucked into that Hitler thing, and nobody wants to be the first one to throw out the Hitler frame.
Yeah, well, no, but that's what, their side. I mean, and the thing is, I grew up conservative. I am actually more conservative than I am liberal, but I do believe in the unions. I think that, the only way for workers and everybody to get fair compensation right now, the last remaining bedrock of that age is the unions, and it has to be protected. And you have the Republican Party who's, doing everything they can to destroy the union. You have them, every part of any kind of working class principle they're actively trying to destroy. And it really is coming down to that. I mean, you have an entire political mechanism that is poised to take out a whole class of people. And I mean, it's going to become an aristocratic society if we don't do anything about it. It's getting really bad.
Do you think they understand that? Because I'm scheduled to give a speech to a very conservative group here very soon, and I've been told my line is to defend the labor unions, and part of me thinks that it's really just become a Machiavellian bludgeon, if you will. No, people don't know much about what unions do or what they've done, but they've been told that they have to be against it, and they have to destroy it because it's so powerful that we just can't have working people with some type of say. Do you think that the people who are so vehemently opposed to it really understand why they're opposed to it?
Well, I think the people who have money and companies understand it, and they're opposed to it, and they understand why. I think that, the average Joe Schmo Republican guy who's, working in the oil fields or whatever, I don't think that he understands the power of a union. But I think that, when you get to those corporations and you're talking to the CEOs and, the board of directors and those guys, they're trying to squash those unions because they don't want to pay fair wages. I mean, I read something the other day that Target actually closed down an entire store because they were about to unionize.
Yeah. Well, Walmart's done it too. They've closed down several.
Yeah.
To avoid having to just sit down. And this is the thing that gets me, just to sit down across the table and to bargain in good faith. Those are things that I think we've lost in this country.
Yeah. I mean, we totally have. And, I keep hearing this term thrown around that, McDonald's has been a big story lately. They're not doing too well financially, and their workers are demanding more money. And everybody keeps saying, well, that's a high school student's job. And, you don't deserve more money because you're working a high school student's job and you're 36 years old or whatever your age they are. But a full-time job is a full-time job.
Yep.
And you should be able to live on that income, whether you're working at McDonald's or whether you're working for, Fortune 500 company. I mean, it's not fair to, people that, they can't get ahead. I mean, how are you going to go look for other work if you're working 40 hours a week at McDonald's or 50 hours a week, making $6 an hour, then you have to go to your night job.
And not just that, David. I mean, I talk to fast food workers all the time on the program to hear about their conditions and what they go through. They don't get regular schedules, so they don't know day to day when they're going to be working, how many hours. They can show up and be sent home and not get paid. They don't even have the option of getting maybe a second or a third job because their hours and their schedules are so erratic. And we've just given so much power to these companies that at some point the hope is that we begin to regain control. And I think it's through our unions.
Yeah, well, I definitely think that, the United States is starting to wake up a little bit to this kind of charade that's going on. Eventually more of the working class, white guys and white women are going to wake up and they're going to say, I'm going to start voting with my checkbook.
And that's what
I've
we can
noticed
hope.
in the last 15 years, I haven't made as much money. Well, I wonder why that is,
Good point. The last question I've got for you. Tomorrow night, the big debate. What are you looking for?
Well, I'm looking for Trump to say something that's going to get him some trouble. What's going to happen is, everybody's going to attack Trump. Jeb Bush has to make a statement. He has to do something because, he's trailing pretty far behind. He hasn't done anything to step up and do what he has to do. But Trump's going to say something dumb. He's going to get himself in trouble. And then I'm looking to see him up all night on Twitter, bashing whoever it was that made him mad.
There you go. Good stuff. David Yankovich, I appreciate you taking time for us. Thanks so much, man.
Thank you very much. Have a good one.
You too. Again, the article, Is This the End of the GOP? We've got a link at thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises.
For Workers Independent News, I'm Joanne Powers. Efforts are underway by consumers and legislators to put an end to the use of slave labor and human trafficking in the fishing industry. Consumers recently filed lawsuits against two of the nation's largest producers of pet foods, Mars and Nestle, over failing to disclose the use of forced labor in their supply chains from the Thai fishing industry. New York Representative Carolyn Maloney also introduced legislation in the House last week to require businesses to publicly disclose what actions they have undertaken to remove labor abuses from their supply chains. She says, there is no question that many goods being sold to American consumers are produced with slave labor, and we have a moral obligation to do something about it, unquote. A new study from the Center for American Progress and researchers from Harvard and Wellesley shows that the percentage of union members in an area is one of the most important factors for determining the future economic success of its children. CAP Managing Director for Economic Policy David Madland says these results both are and aren't surprising.
For those people who are union supporters, I think the results are not that surprising. I've had a bunch of union people come up to me and saying, you're describing my life. My parents were in a union and they were able to work at a blue-collar job and help put me through school. And as a result, I've achieved this level. But on another level, the results are deeply surprising. There has been decades of research on economic mobility showing deep concern that the U.S. has lower mobility than most every other advanced country, fears that our mobility is declining, and no one previously had looked at the role that unions play.
It's not only children with unionized parents whose economic future is brighter as the result of a union presence.
Children whose parents were unionized do better on a whole bunch of outcomes. But when workers join together in unions and they have some power, they also are able to influence the politics of an area. Unions help make public investments. They push, for example, for a school system to spend more money to educate all children.
A unanimous jury on Thursday awarded more than $17 million to 5 immigrant farm workers raped and sexually harassed at Moreno Farms in South Florida. According to the lawsuit, 2 of the owner's sons and a third male supervisor engaged in graphic acts of sexual harassment against female workers in their packing house, including regular groping and propositioning, threatening employees with termination if they refused the supervisor's sexual advances, and attempting to rape and raping multiple employees. All 5 women were ultimately fired for opposing the sexual harassment. Unfortunately, the women are unlikely to collect any of the award, as the packing plant closed after the lawsuit was filed, and none of the men were ever arrested. Florida's Coalition of Immokalee Workers described the case as a powerful reminder of the ongoing epidemic of sexual violence in Florida's farming industry.
WIN made possible in part by the United Auto Workers and by the International Association of Machinists. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Now the lessons of the past were all learned with workers' blood. The mistakes of the bosses we must pay for. From the cities to the farmlands and trenches full of mud. 'Cause war has always been the boss's way, sir. Come on! The union forever defending our rights. Let's fight the right wing, our workers unite. With our brothers and our sisters.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. 1-888-520-RICK, 1-888-520-7425. Is it the end of the Republican Party? When you look at what they stand for right now, and you look at the article David Yankovich wrote, and we've got a link at thericksmithshow.com. Just click on David's name. It'll take you right there. You look at this, and David makes some very valid points. You go back to, and look, it's what we've been saying on this program for 10 years now. The standard of living for working people has fallen. If you go to work, you punch a clock, you collect a paycheck at the end of the week, at the end of 2 weeks, you're a working class stiff. You're like me. You're like millions of other people across this country. Our political class does not care about us. That's painfully apparent when you look at our trade policies. It's painfully apparent when you look at our tax policies. It is painfully apparent when you look at our regulations. It's painfully apparent when you look at education funding. You go down the list of all of the things that you go, what about us? What about working hard? What about playing by the rules? What about getting ahead? What about all that? And the reality is right now the policies have been written solely for and by the big moneyed interests. Corporations don't spend tons of cash on lobbyists. They don't spend tons of cash on think tanks and on all of the media that they pump into our ears. They don't do that because, it would be nice to do. No, they do it because they understand return on investment. They spend a couple $100,000 to get a politician elected who's going to be their quote unquote guy. And that loophole that they get written into legislation saves them billions. That's our political system. And the sooner we wake up to the reality that the president doesn't have a magic wand and that you need to have a movement of active, engaged citizens who are going to be constantly in their representatives' ears and doing as FDR said, you want something passed, make me do it. Get people marching in the streets. You go back to A. Philip Randolph, who during World War II was going to have a march of African Americans on Washington, D.C. to demand a jobs program. Because look, the Great Depression harmed a lot of white people, but it harmed a lot of black people too. And look, no jobs for them in the war economy. And they said, look, we want some of those jobs. So out of that, the threat and the organizing of marching, FDR gave in and signed the executive order that said that there'll be no discrimination policies in the hiring of contractors who build armaments for the U.S. government. It meant jobs for his constituents, for his people. We need to have that kind of organizing that says, you know what? We need policies that are going to benefit working class folks. And who does that? Well, we used to do it through our unions. That was the organizing. But what's been done masterfully by the right wing of this country is they have picked almost the death of 1,000 paper cuts at workers' unions. And every time a company goes out of business or moves overseas or an industry struggles, it's always because it's those unions. It's them. Not you workers. We love you, especially when you're poor and desperate. It's those unions. Them. They did it. And we've kind of bought into it. I mean, there was a couple of years ago, I think it was like 5 or 6 years ago, there was a multi-million-dollar ad buy in newspapers all across the country. When it was during the Bush years, when they were going to have I guess it was longer than that ago, that they were pushing for the Employee Free Choice Act. Wow, has it been that long? Yeah. It was back during the Bush years when the Employee Free Choice Act first came up. And they had, an abandoned factory in the background with a gate, and on it said closed, and underneath it said brought to you by unions. Turns out the company that was behind the gate was put out by basically hedge fund managers, robbing it blind, cutting it off to die, stealing all the workers' pensions and screwing them. But it was the union's fault that it happened. I mean, this is the kind of ridiculous nonsense that we've been shoveled down our throats. And I got to be honest, until we wake up and say, we want policies to benefit us. I mean, think about the fight for education. A couple of years ago when I was doing the labor history minutes, I had done a ton of research on the child labor one. And there were CEOs at the time saying, oh, no, we can't educate the children. Because then they'll be spoiled for work. Because then they'll be too smart and they'll think they're smart. They're better than working. And we need cheap hand laborers. We need people desperate and, not smart enough to know that there's something else out there. I see the same kind of dynamics going on in our education system today. We're training kids from a very young age to believe that they're failures. We're hammering them with these idiotic standardized tests saying, well, you just can't do it. Sorry. You just can't. Sorry. It's just not your thing. But we will train you to do this menial job. And of course, that menial job is not going to pay you anything. But we'll give you an earned income tax credit. We'll make sure that you can, maybe possibly be able to afford to feed yourself, but nothing better than that. Just bare subsistence. And what's frustrating to me on so many levels is it looks like, I don't know, society seems to be okay with it. And for kids that want to go on to college and want to do better, we saddle them with massive debt, enormous debt that they're never going to pay off. I mean, that's really the struggle of our time. And as I look at the presidential election, and as I look at especially tomorrow night's debate, the party of Lincoln, the party of Teddy Roosevelt, the party of Eisenhower, they don't exist. The party of Reagan doesn't even exist. These are corporate extremists. This idea that we want weak, pliable citizens, that we want exploitable workers is fairly remarkable to me. And as I continue to observe what's going on, I mean, yesterday when Scott Walker came out and said, I would immediately do away with all federal unions, which he can't do. And, I'm sure he doesn't know that he can't do it. You need to have an act of Congress to do that. He can't just write that off. But that's what he would push for. What message do you think that sends to all of the other candidates who are now, I'm expecting the question to come up in tomorrow night's debate. I'm expecting there to be something on the level of, what would you do, Donald Trump? And maybe it's a good thing that we have this conversation. I've been invited to come, not this coming Monday, but the Monday after, to come and speak before a very extremely conservative group and easily state that they are an extreme anti-union, anti-worker group in my view. And I agreed to take it. And, I had a friend go, well, why would you go do that? And the reality is, you look at these folks who live in these silos who probably don't know any union members, who don't know what unions are, don't know what they've done, and don't know what the world that we're moving towards is going to look like. Because if you want to look towards the future, look to the past. All of the things that we play daily on this program, all of the labor history and twos that we play, that we've played all year long, that's our past. But it could quite easily be our future again. Every one of those battles, every one of those struggles, every one of those fights, you like the weekend? The union brought you that one. And every other weekend. I used to enjoy the 8-hour day with overtime after 8 hours. That's been destroyed just in my short working life. Now it's after 40, maybe. And you go down the list of all the things that workers through their unions fought for to make their lives better, to make their kids' lives better. They want to go back on all of that. Now they couch it in terms of, no, we don't, that's not what we want. You'll still have those for a short period of time. Think about it for a minute. What happens when you no longer have any say whatsoever? And we're quickly moving to that. I mean, we're almost at a point in this country, when you look at union density, it's almost to the point where it was when it was illegal to be a member of a union. I was having lunch with a friend today, and I said, I remember a conversation I had with Dick Boyd, who was the head of the York Central Labor Council. I think he's about 100 years old now. He's 99, if not 100. And he was telling me about when he was a kid, and his father would sneak out at midnight and they would go down underneath the railroad bridge to hold a meeting to figure out how to organize so that they wouldn't be pitted against one another on the job, so that conditions wouldn't get any worse. And that they were talking about organizing. They had to do it under the cloak of darkness, because if the boss ever found out, they'd all be blacklisted and they would never work again. And he had to swear not to tell his mother because, well, if the mother found out, there'd be what to pay, because you know what? You got to keep food on the table for the kids. But things were so bad at the job that they were willing to take these risks. That's in one person's lifetime. We're not there yet. Not yet. But that's our future. If we allow the political class to bludgeon workers over the head with their power. And this is the stuff that should scare all of us. And not just scare us, but catapult us into action, into actually doing something. I've got family members who will never be a part of a union. Never. They work, office jobs. They think that it's never going to happen, but they're wholly supportive because they've seen what it's done for other people's lives. And I use myself as an example. Kid growing up in the projects. Because of that union card and the work that I did and the contract and the wages I was paid because of that contract, I now live in a neighborhood with doctors and lawyers. And I'm not the kind of person who says, I did it. I pulled myself up. You should do it too. And oh, by the way, we're going to take your ability to unionize away from you. I've never been the guy to kick the ladder away from the wall to make sure no one comes up after me. But that's what our Republican friends do. And I look at someone like Pat Toomey, who has been vehemently anti-union. His father was an electrician. That's how he put bread on his table. It's amazing stuff to me. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts, your questions, your comments. 1-888-520-RICK, 1-888-520-7425. Right back. Stick around.
And the kids locked in the Capitol are fighting till the end. And we're not gonna break tonight, and we're not gonna bend. Some say the union's down, but I asked around, and everybody said, this is a union town, all down the line. This is a union town, all down the line. And if they come to strip our rights away, we'll give them hell every time. This is a union town, all down the line.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1845. 5,000 female workers at the Allegheny Cotton Mill went on strike for a 10-hour workday. The fast streams around Pittsburgh and Allegheny City were ideal to power cotton mills. The mills were overheated and filled with dangerous dust. Many of these women and child workers suffered from work-related lung diseases. The 7 factories of Allegheny City employed about 1,500 young women. These women earned between $2.50 and $6 a week. They worked from sunrise to sunset, 6 days a week. Children made $3 a week at most. In 1843, factory owners cut wages even further. In the 1940s, a woman who had worked in the mills noted the ear filled with the noise of thousands of spindles. Anger over the deplorable working conditions grew. In early 1845, the women and children had had enough. They walked off the job and demanded a 10-hour workday and a living wage. Men supported them by gathering to protect the women from police attacks. After holding out for a month, the women began to return to work to survive. Some of the remaining strikers decided to try and remove the returning workers from the mills. They armed themselves with axes, but could not dislodge the workers. Public opinion turned against the striking women. Then, in September, workers marched on one of the largest area mills. The women broke down the factory gates and forcibly evicted the scab workers. The strike lasted for 6 months, but slowly, out of desperation, more and more of the women workers went back to the mills. Although the women did not get their demands, the strike drew national attention. On Independence Day in 1848, the Pennsylvania legislature put into effect a 10-hour day law. But sadly, the law had numerous loopholes and had no real enforcement. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
We've begun the tale of the first attempt on the life of a U.S. president that targeted Andrew Jackson in 1835. In January of that year, Congressman Warren R. Davis was about to begin his 5th term as the representative from the 6th District of South Carolina when he died unexpectedly at the young age of 41. The funeral was set for January 30th with services to be held in the U.S. Capitol. At that time, Andrew Jackson was beginning the next to last year of his 8 years as president. He was beginning to age more rapidly and walked with a cane. But Jackson, also known as Old Hickory, was a grizzled and still rugged individual. And a Mr. Richard Lawrence, a 30-year-old house painter, was about to find out just how tough President Jackson could be. Join us again for Lawrence's sobering encounter with President Andrew Jackson. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
We make Pennsylvania happen!
The man who sends the investor class diving for their tax shelters. Rick Smith.
At every trough you stop to feed. With your arrogance, your ignorance and greed. Now here come the cuts and redundancy. Through the absolute indifference, the avarice, incompetence, your arrogance, your ignorance, your greed.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. So the Gallup folks have a new poll out. They've been tracking union the view of the public on labor unions for about 60 years, I guess. 80 years, actually. They've been tracking the favorability polling for some time. Now, 6 years ago, support for labor unions hit an all-time low. And, something happened, 6 years ago that, you had this grand collapse. You had all of this economic chaos. So it was easy to find a scapegoat. Say, well, the reason the economy is bad is them. I'm over there. Those people with pensions and still jobs and seniority, and it's them, they're bad. Well, that number, it bottomed out at 48%. 48% approval. But here in the last 6 years, it has jumped 10% up to 58% approval. We're now moving back toward where the midline of over 60% of approval has been. And I think that comes with we've come out of this recession. We've come out of this where we've been told if we tighten our belts and we sacrifice and we do all this stuff, we'll all get better together. We'll all do well. You've heard the rhetoric, right? We've all heard it, and it hasn't happened. And I think what then goes on is people go, look, I've been struggling. I've been doing what we were told. I've been working really hard, but I'm not seeing the benefits of my labor. And now they're kind of turning around their head and going, you know what? Maybe those unions are not such a bad idea after all. Maybe, just maybe, and this is just a thought, maybe if we organized, maybe if we sat down and attempted to collectively bargain with our employer for the wealth that we create, maybe it'd make our lives better. And we're seeing that. We're seeing a number of folks doing just that. And I think it's a good thing. So now the numbers are coming back up. And I guess basically in line with every recession that we've had, things dip, then they come back. But now for the first time in 6 years, we're seeing, people wanting labor unions to have a greater influence. Because one of the questions was, do you want to see labor unions and workers have more influence rather than less? And 37% wanted more, 35% wanted less, 24% said about the same. And what's important about those numbers, because when I saw that, it immediately grabbed me and really solidified what I've always believed. I've always believed the natural unionization rate is about 35, 36, 37%, somewhere right there, a little more than a third. Because if you look at Canada, that's right about where they are. It's where we were at the height of our of union density. That's about the natural rate of unionization. Then you have about a third who said, no, I'll take the benefits, but I don't do none of that stuff. And because you had a third of the workforce unionized, making good wages, benefits, all that stuff, the other third got kind of a freeloaders tag along. They didn't do as well, but they did much better than they would without it. And then about a third go, I don't care one way or another. I'll swing with the wind. That's about the natural rate. So it wasn't surprising to me to see that, 37% said we want more influence for workers. 35% said, no, I don't want that. And 24%, I don't care. Don't care one way or another. Just seemed very interesting to me. And you highlight that with the fact, what we talked about yesterday, that the people in their working lives, people my age and older, about 5% of those workers are in poverty, whereas 65 and older, you drop down to just over 1% of the workers in poverty. Kind of makes you go, I wonder, maybe some policy be good idea. Now, to take this back to our conversation with David Yankovich in the last hour about his piece, is this the end of the Republican Party? Understand what the Republicans are trying to do. They're trying to win the Midwest anyway of old, angry white voters by alienating immigrants and women and union members, which are, to be honest, a good number, especially when you look at Ohio, Wisconsin, and Michigan. Are union members. I don't know how the party thinks that they're going to win when you look at, Ohio, for instance, that has, 22% of its electorate are union households. Wisconsin, 21% of its households are union members. Michigan, 28% of the electorate. Now, nationally, it's only 18%. But in those Midwestern states, where Obama carried almost 2/3 of the union household vote, by attacking unions and workers, do they really think somehow, maybe, possibly, that they're going to win by alienating everyone? And the answer is, I don't think they care about winning. I think they care about the corporate message. I think they care about changing hearts and minds down the road. If we can bash unions enough, if we can go after them enough, they think that the tide will turn. And it's a very scary and bizarre way of doing things, just in my humble opinion. But I'm happy to see that the numbers are swinging back. I do see us at some point very soon back up over 60%, and then potentially back to where we were, hopefully in the peak years of the 50s, where 75% of the workers and the people in the country approved of labor unions, which I think is just incredible. We got a lot of work to do. Let's take a quick break. When we come back and talk a little bit about the big debate tomorrow night. Also, has the Republican Party, have they gone too far to the right? Are they the party of Lincoln? Right back after this. Stick around.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
It's Tuesday, September 15th, 2015.
This fire and many others that have burned this year have been very destructive, and there's no end in sight.
California's all-time record heat and drought explode into more record wildfires.
Oil has won a skirmish, but they've lost the bigger battle.
As the state succeeds in passing some, but not all, of its ambitious clean energy agenda. Plus, score one for the bees. Appeals court overturns EPA's approval of a bee-killing pesticide.
All of that buzz and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
While the Obama administration blames man and the burning of fossil fuels, there is not consensus.
And you know that's true because Fox News keeps telling you so over and over and over again. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, climate change comes home to California here again as we continue this endless, hot, and dry summer.
Yeah, I don't think this is what the Beach Boys meant when they talked about endless summer. First, California Governor Jerry Brown has declared a state of emergency after several fast-moving, massive, out-of-control wildfires in the region around Sacramento exploded in size over the weekend. As we go to air, 23,000 people have been evacuated, over 500 homes destroyed, at least one person killed, with several still unaccounted for. CAL FIRE spokesman Dan Berlant, in an interview with CBS News, called these fires unprecedented.
What we're seeing here are extremely fast-moving wildfires with a little bit of wind and the dry conditions. They have been enough to burn at explosive rates and to have unprecedented amount of acres burned in such a short amount of time.
8 firefighters have lost their own homes in the wildfires. Many residents said they barely escaped with their lives. California's state fire chief said these fires are spreading faster than they have ever seen in their careers, amid California's record drought and its hottest year on record so far.
We have to truck in water from other areas. Our helicopters may have to fly further to get water. This fire and many others that have burned this year have been very destructive, and there's no end in sight.
And a new study finds California's drought is the worst in 500 years. Researchers at the University of Arizona put the current drought into historical context. They said that based on data from tree rings, the current drought is the driest California has been in at least 500 years. That's including snowfall in the Sierra Nevada mountains last winter that hit its lowest level in 500 years. In other words, the data shows the state hasn't been this dry since the days of Christopher Columbus.
Yeah, but there's no consensus on that, says Fox.
On the political front, in our last episode, we reported on how the oil industry's deceptive $1 million ad campaign succeeded in killing off an ambitious provision in the California state legislature that would have cut the state's petroleum use. However, the oil industry could not kill the entire bill. California now has a new, official, legally binding goal of getting 50% of its electricity from renewable sources by 2030. The state is already halfway to that goal, and the legislation also sets a goal of doubling the energy efficiency of buildings with new incentives and revised building codes. Meanwhile, California Governor Jerry Brown said the battle with the oil industry has only intensified his resolve to ramp up California's leadership on climate change. On Monday, in a press conference about the wildfires, he said his climate change initiatives are not about burnishing his legacy, but about preparing for an uncertain future.
I wish if it were just about me, then it would be a very trivial problem. But it's really about you. It's about your children, and it's about the future of how our society is going to function. And what we're seeing in Europe now with mass migrations, that will happen in California. As the Central America and Mexico, as they warm, people are going to get on the move. And it's a real challenge.
People are going to get on the move. If you think the right-wingers are upset about people coming into this country now, just wait until climate change really takes hold down there.
Finally, score one for the bees. In a major and almost unprecedented ruling, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals has overturned the Environmental Protection Agency's approval of an insecticide that is part of a class of pesticides known to harm bees. The three-judge panel reversed the EPA's unlimited approval of the chemical called sulfoxaflor, made by Dow Chemical. The justices said the EPA's permit was based on flawed and limited data. They noted initial testing showed it was toxic to bees. According to agriculture policy experts, courts almost never overturn the EPA.
And I thought the EPA hates business, has a war on coal, has a war on chemicals, has a war on everything that Fox News loves.
Depends on who you're talking to, I guess.
Apparently so. For much more on those stories and all of the other ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. You can download our reports anytime via iTunes or Stitcher or TuneIn. Find us and follow us on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
We will have so much winning if I get elected that you may get bored with winning. Believe me, I agree. You'll never get bored with winning. We never get bored. We are going to turn this country around. We are going to start winning big league.
Yes, winning bigly. My new favorite word. I got to be honest, didn't know it was actually a word until the Donald let me in the know. Now I do, and bigly, everything is bigly now. And tomorrow night, the bigly debate. Cannot wait for the gaggle of 11 there at the Ronald Reagan Library. The 11 will crowd themselves into the stage for the second just beautiful debate. I don't even know if you could call it a debate. More like preening, more like, I don't know. And what's going to be interesting for me is to see how the candidates contort their current views to make them appear Reagan-esque, since they will be in the Reagan Library. And while it's certainly not the party of Lincoln or Teddy or Ike, I seriously question any resemblance to the party of Ronald Reagan either. So here to talk a little bit about that, I've asked Angela Kelley. She's the executive director of the Center for American Progress Action Fund. Come talk to us about their piece on just how extreme the Republican Party has become. Angela, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you so much, Rick. Great to be with you.
So I'm really kind of looking forward to tomorrow night, just to see how the gymnastics, how they say I'm more Ronald Reagan than you.
Yeah, well, poor President Reagan must be rolling over in his grave when he looks at the policies that all these guys are advocating against Reagan's record. They hold him out as an idol, their role model. They said that time and time again, yet on key issues where Reagan made some big accomplishments: immigration, gun violence prevention.
Well, he was shot after all.
He was good on all these things, right?
Yeah.
And the crop of candidates we have right now would say no, no, and no to everything that Reagan, frankly, held out as his biggest accomplishments.
Yeah, but on the gun issue, he was shot.
Yeah, well, he was, and that was a horrible moment that I'm sure is ingrained in everyone's memory. But look, what we've seen in the years since the Reagan presidency is the number of people in the U.S. who've died from gun violence, 836,000. The number of soldiers that have been killed in combat in all of U.S. history is 656,000. So we have more people have been killed by gun violence than soldiers have died in combat in every war in our country's history.
Wow.
So, I don't know how Reagan, if it was because he was shot that he got to the position that he did, but, God bless him for having done that. And it just pains me that other Republican candidates can't follow suit.
I mean, it's one of those things that just common sense seems to be a loss. And I got to wonder if it's just not this team sport mentality that we have, because I have some Republican friends who they more view themselves as, the Eisenhower kind of moderate conservatives, strong on foreign defense, but socially conscious of everything around them. Those folks seem to be gone from the party, homogenized into these extremist little go-bots.
Yeah, well, at least they're hiding under their desks, and I think it's to the peril of the party. The conversation that the Republican candidates are having now is extreme, and it's offensive. It's offensive to women. It's offensive to Latinos. I fit both those categories, and I can tell you that it is appalling to many in my family who have conservative streak in them, and would want to listen to what a Republican has to say, but can't get past the fact that they're being insulted time and time again. So I really do feel that, the demographics tell a clear story in the terms of the direction of the rising American electorate, young, female, people of color. And I just think that these guys, are speaking not only just over them, but shouting at them in insulting ways.
So then the question is why are they? I mean, this has been going on for at least 10 years now. I mean, you've been seeing this march towards this extremist position. How is it that we've continued to vote for them? How is it that they continue to even be somewhat, competitive in national races with this kind of stance?
Well, that certainly wasn't the case in 2008 and in 2012. Case in point, Mitt Romney, I think, in some ways tried to be more moderate when it came to the issue of immigration, though he sunk himself early on by talking about self-deportation and that he'd veto the DREAM Act for undocumented kids who came here as children. So, in some ways, I think that they try, but they almost can't help themselves. But, I don't see them ever getting inside the Oval Office to pick new curtains and a new rug. It's mind-boggling to me. So what plays well for the primaries is going to sink them for the general.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point, because the reality is I don't know how you win a national election, alienating virtually everyone except for the very well-to-do and the top maybe 10% of the wealth class. And because I look at the attacks on workers, especially Scott Walker came out yesterday saying we would do away with all federal unions and we're going to make the entire nation this no rights at work nation. And how many Republican voters are union members? You're losing them as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Talk about turning your back on the working people at a time where the country is very attuned to the fact that there is just gross inequality when it comes to incomes, right? To who's in the 1% and who's in the 99%. And so I do feel like they're turning their back on the American worker. And it's something that Walker is thumping his chest in pride, but it leaves me wondering, well, who's going to vote for him?
Sadly, he won 3 elections in Wisconsin, which scares me. He's one of the people who scare me to death, because that kind of insanity on the national level only leads us back 100 years to where we relive the good old days of the 80s and 90s, the 1880s and 1890s.
That's right. I don't know. I don't think that what he's able to do in Wisconsin, he can translate into a national stage. He came out sort of as the golden boy for a 5 minutes, now many weeks, not months ago, and his numbers have been dropping like a lead balloon. So I don't think that he can carry that kind of hostile message for long. But it's really hard to know, frankly, who is going to emerge, because it's really Donald Trump that is defining virtually every conversation. And he's a really loud and rich bully, frankly.
Yep.
So it's making it impossible to really understand how any of these guys first can, get the nomination and then eventually ever win the election, because we can't get past the extreme insult coming out of Donald Trump's mouth. And, and then to see how the other candidates do or don't respond, maybe that's what will stick, right? The fact that Trump is insulting Latinos, that he does insult women, that he wants to deport 11 million immigrants, and then you don't hear the other candidates saying enough, stop insulting my mom, my wife, my sister, my neighbor, who works hard and came from another country. And maybe the fact that they've been silent, that'll stick with them.
That speaks volumes as well. But do you think at some point, maybe tomorrow or at a future moment in time, that person who does step forward and say all of this that we're talking about is ridiculous, we need to have some semblance of sanity, that they then rise to the top, or is the Republican field during the primaries so far to the extreme that would never happen?
Well, I mean, I think they do want to win. And they know that they need to talk about issues, which goes beyond, sound bites.
Do they? I mean, because I look at the fact that Trump's at the top, and I still don't know what his issues are other than we hate immigrants.
Right, and that
that he would date his daughter.
Right. It's just, I agree with you. He's gotten a lot of airtime. I mean, look at how much time we're spending talking about him, because that's all that's reported. So I don't know. I mean, I look forward to the day where we will actually have a sober conversation about what's sound policy, and stop giving the bully in the schoolyard so much attention.
Yep.
But until he's voted off the island, I'm afraid that's the drama we're all going to be watching.
And I love the fact that you use the TV reality show stuff as the way we get him out.
Yeah,
vote him off the
that
island.
kind of is, right? It's sort of a combination of reality TV and then sort of like a beauty pageant. It's like a combination of those two things. It's just awful.
And for me, the issues that, and I've been paying attention to both sides. I listen to Bernie Sanders, who I like an awful lot, talking to issues very specific issues to working people in this country that are saying, look, the income inequality is killing us. The fact that our young people are saddled with over $1 trillion in student loan debt, which if we can give anything to Ronald Reagan, we can give him the credit for creating the world's largest billionaire class in the history of civilization by stealing from workers and giving to them, and also saddling kids with massive debt. Because I remember reading that California used to give its students free college education. That is until Ronald Reagan came along.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those days, I'm afraid, are long ago past. As the mother of a child that just started college, I can tell you that we're sweating bullets on how we're going to pay tuition. This is for an in-state school. And, it shouldn't be that way, that the daughter of parents, my husband's a school teacher, I work at a nonprofit. We should be able to send our daughter without worrying as much as we're having to a public university. But that's not the case. And we're the lucky ones.
Yeah, I mean, that's the sad thing. And it comes back to me, all of this, all of the political back and forths and each side wanting to bludgeon the other. At the end of the day, you still have working people in this country who just want to get up and go to work, raise their families, and have better opportunities for their kids than they had. And at some point, I think the parties and the politicians and all of these players have got to come back to that reality. Because what Trump being in the front tells me is there are a lot of really ticked off people out there.
There are. It's still early, though. I mean, for those of us who watch this and live and breathe, it feels like the election's tomorrow, but it's not. It's still many, many months away. And while it is certainly painful to watch Donald Trump steal the headlines and be in front of so many cameras, I think at the end of the day, it will really force the Republican Party to have to come to terms with who do they want to stand for. And
I thought Donald Trump did that though, Angela. Didn't they do that after the last thumping they took? Didn't Reince Priebus have the whole big committee on how we're going to talk nice to women, and had some training sessions on representatives talking to women, and actually brought binders full in?
Yeah.
I mean, didn't they already do that? I mean, is this what came out of that?
Well, I'm a tiny bit more optimistic than you are, so I'm hoping that they'll be able to dust that off. You're right. There was they called it the autopsy on why they lost in 2012. A major issue that they pointed to was, again, immigration, and, frankly, just the hostile tone with which they dealt and talk about the immigrants in this country. And they said that they needed to get immigration reform done. This is just like one example. And, a lot of Republicans, particularly in the Senate, got the memo, and they worked with Democrats, which is almost unheard of these days, and they passed a bill. Why didn't that become law? Because as we all learned in civics class, you need the House to pass a piece of legislation, and they didn't. They refused. They only wanted to talk about enforcement and deportation. So that was a key component to what the Republicans pointed to, why they lost in 2012. They haven't seemed to learn their lesson, at least across the party. But I really do think it will come down to a battle between, the wiser voices in the Senate that were able to muster the political capital to pass an immigration bill, and then the hotheads in the House who just, stamped their feet like a toddler and walked out of the room.
And that's exactly how the system was set up.
Yes, there it is.
Sadly, but at the end of the day, going back to the Reagan frame, since tomorrow's debate will be at the Reagan Library there. Just to be clear, Reagan did pass immigration reform. And Reagan, I know there are some who are saying, amnesty, but he did actually, take his head out of the sand for a bit. He did do that. He did establish some background check stuff on guns. He did some sane things.
He did a lot. He put 2.7 million undocumented people on a path to citizenship. Many of them are citizens now, paying their taxes, and they're part of the electorate, particularly in California. He was actually ahead of his time on issues related to the climate. So he signed an international treaty that phased out 100 dangerous gases and protected our ozone layer. We've already talked about what he's done regarding gun violence. So yes, in many ways, he is the Republican that most of us would definitely identify today as moderate, and sadly there doesn't seem to be anybody who's legitimately following in his footsteps.
Yeah, but on the climate change thing, I still can't get over ripping the solar panels off the White House.
Oh, you're right. Look, there's a lot of other things. Don't get me started on, issues related to Central America and all that. So I'm not saying that he was a perfect president by any stretch.
Right.
But I am saying that on some very salient issues that are hot button today, the irony that the Republicans point to Ronald Reagan as their hero, and yet they would turn their back on at least 6 different issue areas where he led. They wouldn't. And that to me is a stunning contradiction that I really hope comes out tomorrow night.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Last question I've got for you. What do you expect as the demeanor of the crowded field? Do they all go after Trump, or do they all try to make themselves look like Ronald, the sainted one?
Yeah, good question. I mean, they've tried different things. In the last debate, Rand Paul, I think, tried to go after him, and he got swatted back like a fly with an Uzi. So I don't know. I think that's probably the issue that they're all pondering, as to how aggressive do they be, and do they hit the gas pedal and try to run right over him, or do they moderate themselves? I think also, frankly, having a woman on stage is going to add to an interesting dynamic in terms of how she's treated, given really the ugliness and sexism of a lot of Trump's comments and the stunning silence by the other guys. So I would say that we should take our bathroom breaks only at the commercial. We have to pop a lot of popcorn and have our favorite glass of wine, and stay tuned for what will be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think every time they mention Reagan, that should be the drinking.
Oh, there you go.
And
nobody drives.
There's nobody old enough on the stage to say I knew Ronald Reagan, and you're no Ronald Reagan.
Yeah, you're right.
So there you go.
You're right.
Angela, I appreciate you taking a little time for us. Thanks so much.
It was a ton of fun. Thank you. Have a great evening.
Appreciate it
Bye-bye.
so much. Angela Kelley, she's the executive director over at the Center for American Progress Action Fund. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
When the kids are united, they can never be divided. Yesterday, there's a brand new chef today.
Uncovering the con in conservatism. Rick Smith.
Donnie Trump is said to be the goofiest presidential pretender in the GOP stable. But after all, he's a professional, made-for-TV stuntman. So his P.T. Barnum political shtick is no surprise. But the real surprise is that the flare-haired Donald is getting a serious challenge for goofiest of them all from an amateur practitioner of slapstick, Scott Walker. Only a few weeks ago, the political cognoscenti were hailing the sleepy-eyed Wisconsin governor as one of the, quote, serious candidates in the Republican herd. But he has since done so many splashy flip-flops on his policies that SeaWorld is reportedly trying to hire him to do backflips with Shamu. For example, he had previously been a quasi-sane Republican on the issue of citizenship for some undocumented immigrants. But when Trump surged to front-runner status as a flaming maniacal immigrant basher, suddenly Scotty began foaming at the mouth like a mad dog, trying to outbash Donnie. Yes, he yapped, Trump is right that we need to build a big old hermetically sealed wall on the Mexican border, but he frantically exclaimed, we also need to build a wall across our northern border with Canada. Canada? Even Republicans hooted at such overwrought goofiness. As Rand Paul politely put it, that's a pretty dumb idea. So dumb that Governor Goofy collapsed into an addlepated heap of denial. I didn't say that at all, he barked a couple of days later. I've never talked about a wall to the north. Only he had. On Meet the Press, the national TV show. Walker was asked directly, do you want to build a wall north of here too? Rather than laugh it off, Walker declared with a straight face, that is a legitimate issue for us to look at. This is Jim Hightower saying, a 4,000-mile wall to protect us from friendly Canadians? Or maybe he wants to keep us from escaping to Canada if he becomes president. Walker is serious, all right. Seriously goofy.
What do the corporate powers from Wall Street to Walmart have in common? They hate the Hightower Lowdown. You can see why at www.hightowerlowdown.org.
From Sonoma County, California, this is Your World in 2 Minutes. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, with the Talk Radio News Service. Less than 10 miles from some of America's most prized vineyards, a pair of wildfires are plaguing this bone-dry landscape, causing California Governor Jerry Brown to declare a state of emergency. A blaze over the weekend in nearby Lake County devastated the small community of Middletown. The fire is being described by state officials as one of the fastest growing in California history. As of Monday morning, the fire had consumed 61,000 acres and was only 5% contained. Cal Fire officials are urging extreme caution.
If you live, though, in this region, even if you are not under a mandatory evacuation, you have to be prepared.
According to data from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, Lake County straddles Grade 2 severe and Grade 3 extreme drought. That's bad, but it could be and is worse not far away. 46% of California is considered to be in Grade 4 exceptional drought.
This has been a very important day in the life of the nation.
Australia has a new Prime Minister. Tony Abbott was replaced today by members of his ruling Liberal Party as they promoted his former opponent, Malcolm Turnbull, to lead the land down under. Abbott had caused division within the ruling Labour Party in recent months, including with a decision to prevent party members from being allowed to cast a conscience vote on gay marriage. Abbott's lack of concern over climate change policy had also singled him out for criticism. Turnbull previously took issue with Abbott's climate stance, but asked today whether to expect a major policy change now, Turnbull reportedly said no, and that the country's policies were, quote, very well designed. For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
The man who sends the investor class diving for their tax shelters. Vic Smith.
Yeah, it will be quite interesting to see tomorrow's debate. I'm really looking forward to it, and I think you should be too. It will be fun to watch them contort. It will be fun to watch them try and change their policies. Now, there are some that Reagan would be all in favor of, and that would be the attacks on workers, the attacks on taxes, more of the bad deregulation, more of the bad bad tax code, more hand money to the wealthy, and let them do something. Not necessarily good things, but they'll do something, I guess. So to me, the buzzword I think is going to be anytime someone compares themselves or their views to Ronald Reagan. That's what I'm going to be looking for. And that's what I think will be interesting. Now, on a number of things, they may be, screwing up education. Yeah. I go back to California. They used to have free college education until Reagan became governor, and he went and destroyed that. Then, putting into place where people had to pay higher tuition until where we are today, a group of college kids and people at the end of their years with massive debt. Amazing. Just that we put up with it, I guess. That's the amazing part. Let's take a quick break. Right back. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises.
For Workers Independent News, I'm Joanne Powers. Efforts are underway by consumers and legislators to put an end to the use of slave labor and human trafficking in the fishing industry. Consumers recently filed lawsuits against two of the nation's largest producers of pet foods, Mars and Nestle, over failing to disclose the use of forced labor in their supply chains from the Thai fishing industry. New York Representative Carolyn Maloney also introduced legislation in the House last week to require businesses to publicly disclose what actions they have undertaken to remove labor abuses from their supply chains. She says, "There is no question that many goods being sold to American consumers are produced with slave labor, and we have a moral obligation to do something about it," unquote. A new study from the Center for American Progress and researchers from Harvard and Wellesley shows that the percentage of union members in an area is one of the most important factors for determining the future economic success of its children. CAP Managing Director for Economic Policy David Madland says these results both are and aren't surprising.
For those people who are union supporters, I think the results are not that surprising. I've had a bunch of union people come up to me and saying, "You're describing my life. My parents were in a union and they were able to work at a blue-collar job and help put me through school, and as a result, I've achieved this level." But on another level, the results are deeply surprising. There has been decades of research on economic mobility showing deep concern that the U.S. has lower mobility than most every other advanced country, fears that our mobility is declining, and no one previously had looked at the role that unions play.
It's not only children with unionized parents whose economic future is brighter as the result of a union presence.
Children whose parents were unionized do better on a whole bunch of outcomes. But when workers join together in unions and they have some power, they also are able to influence the politics of an area. Unions help make public investments. They push, for example, for a school system to spend more money to educate all children.
A unanimous jury on Thursday awarded more than $17 million to 5 immigrant farm workers raped and sexually harassed at Moreno Farms in South Florida. According to the lawsuit, 2 of the owner's sons and a third male supervisor engaged in graphic acts of sexual harassment against female workers in their packing house, including regular groping and propositioning, threatening employees with termination if they refused the supervisor's sexual advances, and attempting to rape and raping multiple employees. All 5 women were ultimately fired for opposing the sexual harassment. Unfortunately, the women are unlikely to collect any of the award, as the packing plant closed after the lawsuit was filed, and none of the men were ever arrested. Florida's Coalition of Immokalee Workers described the case as a powerful reminder of the ongoing epidemic of sexual violence in Florida's farming industry.
WIN made possible in part by the United Auto Workers and by the International Association of Machinists. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Yes, it is all about the children, even after they're born. Rick Smith.
So Governor Corbett's now gone, right? We saw Corbett out the door, and fortunately so, 4 years of bad budgets, enough. But the legacy doth live on. In 4 years of massive, draconian, drastic cuts, painful, deep, almost through the bone cuts, in my view, to public education. And I look at what's going on in Philadelphia. You look at the Chester Upland School District and the systematic dysfunction that right there has been caused by a bunch of things, defunding among the very top of them. But you look at the schools that are at the top, and I found out that there's this Central High School in Philadelphia that's rated number 1 in the district and number 2 across the state. And I got this list of all the cuts in programs, all the cuts in staffing, all the cuts just all across the board. And I go, you know what? Someone's got to talk about this, which is why I've asked George Bezanis. He's a history teacher there at Central High School. He's also the union rep for the building. George, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, thanks for having me.
So, I look at the last 4 years of bad budgets here in Pennsylvania, the massive, drastic cuts. And, we were told, no, it's not going to be a problem. I look at this list that I was sent of, the number of secretaries cut, the custodial staff, all this stuff. And I'm looking at it going, how does a school function without custodial people, without secretaries, without teachers in classrooms? How does that happen?
Right, Rick. It's a little ridiculous. And the reason I decided to put that list together is we're having our back to school night function this Thursday. And last year we did a what's not back to school function. It was the first year that we did it. And that was still under Corbett and the draconian cuts. Last year we started some classes with upwards of 50 kids per class. It's ridiculous. We didn't, logistically, we couldn't even fit the kids in the classroom.
Jeez.
So this year, I think it seems to many people that austerity has become the new norm. So I don't want, and our building didn't want people to think, oh, everything's okay now. Corbett's out, everything's good. And as you were saying, it's 4 years of drastic cuts, and a lot of that funding still hasn't been put back into the schools. Just to give you an example, at one point we had 8 guidance counselors. Our school, as you said, is one of the top-ranked schools in the state, if not the country, and we have almost a 99% college acceptance rate. So we had 8 counselors to help around 2,000 to 3,000 kids, 2,500 kids. That was cut down to 2 at one point. And this year, in order to get more counselors, I think we're up to 4 now. The principal said, you know what, I have to give up one of my assistant principals. So it's, we're taking from one hand to go to the other. And the situation is just not sustainable.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about guidance counselors. Well, there are other schools in Philadelphia that don't have nurses or librarians, which is completely insane to me. But the fact that the number that I saw, the student to guidance counselor ratio, you have it like 564 to 1, where the
Right.
National Association of School Counselors puts the optimal number around 250 to 1. You're more than double that.
Yeah, more than double. And again, we make ends meet, but we're constantly trying to figure out, how are we going to do it with counselors? There's a fiasco going on in the school district where they recently outsourced substitute teachers. That's ridiculous. They outsourced it to a private substitute teacher program that was promising 90% fill rate. Our first week of school was 11% fill rate, which means we had 5 teachers who were out for legitimate reasons. Some of them are battling cancer. One of them has Legionnaire's disease. And these are absences that the district knew about, but they just cut entirely the substitute service. They gave it over to a for-profit company, and the company is falling through the cracks. So not only are we trying to fill the cracks left by the Corbett budget, where we have to do that, but now we have to scramble during our off and lunch periods to cover for teachers that the district isn't paying for. It's really absurd.
It is absurd. But again, what we're seeing is not just with teachers, it's with all workers across the entire nation, that
Exactly.
we're cutting, and yet we're heaping more and more responsibility onto fewer and fewer people. At some point, there's got to be a burnout point. At some point, there's got to be resistance, right?
Right. It seems to me it's like this assembly line model of the workplace. How fast can we crank that assembly line before the workers break? And we're doing our best, but it's no way to run a school. It's no way to treat the middle class of this country, which is rapidly disappearing. And you're right. I mean, enough is enough. So what we've decided to do is have this back to school protest. I also belong to a more radical social justice union called the Caucus of Working Educators in our union. And, we're pushing our union leadership and our district saying enough is enough. Where does it end?
And that's the question. I mean, and here's the thing that gets me, George. This Central High School, as has been told to me, is the top one. If this is what we're doing to the best of the best and the best and the brightest, if this is what we're doing to them, what are we doing to the more struggling schools?
Oh yeah, and I have no illusions that we're exceptional. Just to give you an example, our librarian was cut last year. We didn't have money for a librarian, though we had a brand new library. So we have a very strong alumni base. So an anonymous donor came in and donated something like $100,000, not only to fill in the librarian's position, but supplies and everything. And we're very fortunate to have that. But you're right. What about the schools that don't have that base? What about the schools that don't have that? And it shows you the priority of a lot of our politicians, that they're not willing to fund schools properly. There's money for every other pet project. We give Comcast tax-free abatements to build skyscrapers in Philadelphia, but we don't have money for a guidance counselor. Where's the country's priorities?
No, it's a good question. Where's the priorities here in the Capitol? In the Capitol, because we still don't have a budget. And the question then becomes, how much longer can we go without a budget, and what does that mean to education going forward? I mean, I look at the Chester Upland district where the teachers had said, we'll work for free because the money's not here yet, because we had to give all the money over to the charter schools because we still don't have a budget here in Harrisburg. That's not the way. To me, that's not the way that we run an education system. What message does that leave for our kids?
Right. And speaking of Chester Upland, Philadelphia, we had our contract as status quo, which basically means nothing has happened. And on that flyer we're handing out on what's not back to school night, we also have how much the average teacher at our school has sacrificed. So to give you a personal example, I had to take out college loans to pay for my master's degree. And part of the contract was that I would get a salary increase. We're going on year 3 now without any salary increase. And just for me personally, that's around $22,000 that I've lost.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's money. I have 2 young kids. I have a 2-year-old, a 5-year-old. My mortgage, everything's going up. My car insurance went up, everything. And we took the average out of the entire school, and that's one school in Philadelphia. And when you averaged it out, the staff at our school at Central has given back something like $1.5 million, which, everyone keeps saying, oh, well, you're not sacrificing enough. How much can we sacrifice? How much more can we sacrifice?
Well,
I always like telling people, teachers' working conditions are students' learning conditions. So something's got to give.
And that's an excellent point. And I think an important one, because we talk about how much we love the children, but how much we seem to, or I shouldn't say all of us, there's a certain political party that seems to despise teachers and have no problem telling us how much they don't like teachers and their unions. In fact, one of them wants to punch you guys in the face.
Right, yeah, Governor Christie over there.
So I look at this.
Presidential material there.
Yeah, I look at this, and at some point we parents have to stand up and say enough is enough as well. And that's why I think it's important to have the kind of meetings and the kind of informational pickets or protests that you guys have been having.
Right. And last year we did it really because there was the gubernatorial election. This year, although the election on November 4th is going to be a little bit lower key, I think we need to get a strong turnout because there are 3 open seats on the PA Supreme Court, which is unprecedented, really. And I don't think a lot of parents and public education activists realize how important this election is, because you don't get the right judges on that bench. A lot of these charter school laws, a lot of the do schools, does the state have a obligation to properly fund education? A lot of these decisions are going to be made by judges that may not believe in public education.
Yep, they may give them the Catholic schools. And you want to know why the Supreme Court's important? Look at Washington State.
Yes.
who just recently ruled that their charter law was unconstitutional, which I'm hoping sends a ripple effect across this country, here to Pennsylvania at least, because you look at a lot of our problems, and I'm sure Philadelphia is ground zero for this. A lot of the problems, in my view, are insane charter laws.
Right, and the Philadelphia Inquirer yesterday ran an excellent research piece about the bond market that has sprung up for charter schools, and that has ended up costing not Philadelphia taxpayers, but Pennsylvania taxpayers as a whole, something like $500 million, simply because of the construction boom that charter schools are taking. They're taking out these high-risk bond loans, and then when the charter schools go broke, because a lot of them have poor financing or nepotism or other issues going on with them, that property is therefore liquidated to pay off the bond, and in the end, it's the taxpayer who lost. It's just this huge Ponzi scheme that comes collapsing upon itself.
And that's not, to me, the kind of education I want my kids to get. I want them to be critical thinkers and members of society, not schemers and con artists.
Right, and then they look at it and they say, "Hey, wait a minute, the CEO of my charter," because they always have a CEO. The CEO of my charter and his brother has this pretty good operation here. So, I mean, it's not to say that all charters are bad, just like to say all Philadelphia public schools are bad. When I tell people I work in Philadelphia, I say, "Oh my gosh, Philadelphia." Then I tell them it's Central High School. It's, what's Central High School? It's the second oldest public school in the country, the highest ranked school in the state, in the city. And, we've produced Nobel laureates and Pulitzer Prize winners. So, you can't throw everything out. That's my point here. Everyone likes to have a quick fix, but there's never a quick fix when it comes to dealing with childhood poverty, the destruction of the middle class, these complicated issues that really no one wants to tackle.
Yeah, well, to me, the quick fix is not privatizing and profitizing my kids' opportunity at a future. I guess that's a starting premise for me.
Right, exactly.
So last question I've got for you, what can we do to help? I mean, outside of raising awareness and, maybe calling our legislators to say, get your behinds to work and get a budget passed, what should we be doing?
Well, again, remember to vote on November 4th. Like I said, there's 3 judges going up. So, please remember to vote on that particular day. And just remember that just because it seems like everything is okay because we're not talking about massive budget cuts. We're not talking about cuts, but funding has not been restored. So, we've got a long way to go just to reach where we used to be.
Yep.
So as long as you raise awareness with different people and remember to vote, hopefully that'll help at least get the problem sort of tackled.
Get us back to somewhere near sanity. Maybe
Right.
we restore some of those massive Corbett budget cuts. George, I appreciate you taking a little time for us. Thanks for filling us in.
having me, Rick.
Great talking with you. George Bezanis, he's a history teacher there at Central High School. Let's take a quick break. Back with your thoughts. 1-888-520-RICK, 1-888-520-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Got no time for living, yes, I'm working all the time. It seems to me I could live my life a lot better than I think I have. I guess that's why they call me the working man.
Making the blue blood see red. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1845. 5,000 female workers at the Allegheny Cotton Mill went on strike for a 10-hour workday. The fast streams around Pittsburgh and Allegheny City were ideal to power cotton mills. The mills were overheated and filled with dangerous dust. Many of these women and child workers suffered from work-related lung diseases. The 7 factories of Allegheny City employed about 1,500 young women. These women earned between $2.50 and $6 a week. They worked from sunrise to sunset, 6 days a week. Children made $3 a week at most. In 1843, factory owners cut wages even further. In the 1940s, a woman who had worked in the mills noted, "The ear filled with the noise of thousands of spindles." Anger over the deplorable working conditions grew. In early 1845, the women and children had had enough. They walked off the job and demanded a 10-hour workday and a living wage. Men supported them by gathering to protect the women from police attacks. After holding out for a month, the women began to return to work to survive. Some of the remaining strikers decided to try and remove the returning workers from the mills. They armed themselves with axes, but could not dislodge the workers. Public opinion turned against the striking women. Then, in September, workers marched on one of the largest area mills. The women broke down the factory gates and forcibly evicted the scab workers. The strike lasted for 6 months, but slowly, out of desperation, more and more of the women workers went back to the mills. Although the women did not get their demands, the strike drew national attention. On Independence Day in 1848, the Pennsylvania legislature put into effect a 10-hour day law. But sadly, the law had numerous loopholes and had no real enforcement. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
We've begun the tale of the first attempt on the life of a U.S. president that targeted Andrew Jackson in 1835. In January of that year, Congressman Warren R. Davis was about to begin his 5th term as the representative from the 6th District of South Carolina when he died unexpectedly at the young age of 41. The funeral was set for January 30th with services to be held in the U.S. Capitol. At that time, Andrew Jackson was beginning the next to last year of his 8 years as president. He was beginning to age more rapidly and walked with a cane. But Jackson, also known as Old Hickory, was a grizzled and still rugged individual. And a Mr. Richard Lawrence, a 30-year-old house painter, was about to find out just how tough President Jackson could be. Join us again for Lawrence's sobering encounter with President Andrew Jackson. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
Last year, 120,000 people over the age of 60 in the United States of America had their Social Security payments garnished because of student loan debt. It is a multi-generational crisis. And anybody who has, sweated over their sons and daughters' student loan payments knows that it's not just about students, it's about all of us.
Think about that for a second. That interview I did was 4 years ago. Or he said 120,000 seniors are getting their Social Security payments garnished because of college student loans they took out in years past. That number has gone up now up to 160,000 and only getting worse. We now have about 700,000 seniors across the country who are paying on student loan debts that they made when they were younger. And, because you were told, look, you get a college degree, everything will be wonderful. The doors of the middle class will swing wide open. And the reality is, you go back and I blame a lot of things on Ronald Reagan and on that era. And while it wasn't Reagan's doing mentally, it was his administration. It was the people he put in. It was the decade or so of groundwork that the conservative class, that the wealth class built. You go back to the early 1970s, you have the Powell Memo, you have the founding of the Heritage Foundation, you have the founding of ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, you have the founding of all of these right-wing think tanks and idea generators. Bad ideas, but still. And you go and you hear when Milton Friedman says, You know, it's the ideas that are lying around that we grab onto in times of crisis. That was the basis. So you're saying, well, you know what? We got too many kids going to college for free. They need to have some skin in the game. So we decide, as they did during the Reagan era, to trade the future of people's children and their grandchildren for a little property tax relief. So they ended the free college tuition. Now students were going to have to take out student loans. And at first it started out to be just a little bit, and a little bit more, and a little bit more, and a little bit more, until here we are. And we were told the kids wouldn't even notice it. It would be so small that, by having a college degree, that would put them in that next bracket of income, because college degree people get better jobs and make more money. So they would pay it back in no time at all. It would be done before you know it. And now here we are. We've got 160,000 seniors having their Social Security garnished because they didn't make enough money and they're struggling. Now, if you remember, Social Security was never supposed to be garnished. You weren't allowed to do that from its inception up until the Gingrich era, when they stripped that protection away in 1996. So now we can garnish seniors' wages for having the audacity to want to get an education. What's interesting to me is we go back to this, and I heard it as a kid going to school. When I was young, you take out the loans. It's not a lot. I remember, I think the most I took out in a year was like $4,000. And they said, well, you get that job and you'll make $50,000 or $60,000 a year, and you'll be able to pay that back in no time at all. Because back then, $60,000 a year was good money, really good money. And when I ran out of money to go to school, the first job I got, making $15 an hour, helped pay some of that back. I was able to pay those loans off quickly because I was making $15 an hour back then, which, if you stop and think about it, it would be almost, like $28 an hour today, which is a good, solid wage. I look at this and I go, what's happened over the years? What's happened? And it's slowly progressed until I think now we're hitting that critical mass. We're hitting that point to where people are going, whoa, wait a second. This isn't what was supposed to happen. I mean, the charter schools, nobody 20 years ago envisioned, or at least out loud, that it would be a profit generator where money's being screwed out of the schools and it's being used to destroy the public schools. It was envisioned that it would give people a choice. It would be competition, and they would both be funded, and everything would be great, and they would be competing, and who could be against that, right? Well, what it's turned into is we're starving the public schools and not doing all that well at it, while enriching the handfuls of the bondholders and the hedge fund managers and the billionaires. I don't think anybody at the time thought it was all that outrageous to say, a couple of bucks, put a little skin in the game for college students. I don't think they ever thought it would get to where it is now, to where you have predatory lenders getting involved in student loans and setting up ridiculous higher education institutions, and basically thieves who are diploma mills who hand out pieces of paper for exorbitant sums. And what you have is a generation of kids who now I have paper, I've got the degree you told me to get. Where's the job that comes with it? Where's that ticket? Where's the key to the middle class? How do I get there? I got the paper you told me to get. And I've got all of this massive loan debt to go with it. And the sad reality is we're getting to that point where that bubble bursts. There's trouble. So there's part of me that says, what we need to be doing is we need to be canceling some of the debt that people have from these predators, going after the predators and clawing back some of the enormous amount of federal money that we've handed out. That's a start. And maybe start looking with a little bit closer eye when we want to start up a 7-Eleven storefront university. with a multi-million-dollar advertising budget and a series of adjunct professors who are collecting welfare. Maybe, just maybe, that's a place where we can start thinking about this stuff. Because what we've done to higher education is we've told the working class, oh, you can do it on your terms online. And, your employer will look at it and go, it's great. Ain't happening. It's all a con. And until we figure that out and roll some of that back, it's going to continue. And we're going to continue to get fleeced, which is what's happening with education dollars. We're not making widgets anymore. We're not making whatnots anymore. We're not building stuff. We're just scheming and scamming. And there's something seriously wrong with that. Which is why, again, this November, and I think George pointed it out so aptly, extraordinarily important election. Have the ability to put 3 Supreme Court justices on the court. And if you need to know why it's important, look at what happened in Washington State. They said that profitized education system that they want, unconstitutional, because it's not run by we the people. Extremely important. Let's take a quick break. When we come back and do a little bit of the news, stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
I'll never bend. I'm with you now until the end.
Thought-provoking, intelligent conversation with a heart. The voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
It's Tuesday, September 15th, 2015.
This fire and many others that have burned this year have been very destructive, and there's no end in sight.
California's all-time record heat and drought explode into more record wildfires.
Oil has won a skirmish, but they've lost the bigger battle.
As the state succeeds in passing some, but not all, of its ambitious clean energy agenda. Plus, score one for the bees. Appeals court overturns EPA's approval of a bee-killing pesticide.
All of that buzz and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
While the Obama administration blames man and the burning of fossil fuels, there is not consensus.
And you know that's true because Fox News keeps telling you so over and over and over again. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, climate change comes home to California here again as we continue this endless, hot, and dry summer.
Yeah, I don't think this is what the Beach Boys meant when they talked about endless summer. First, California Governor Jerry Brown has declared a state of emergency after several fast-moving, massive, out-of-control wildfires in the region around Sacramento exploded in size over the weekend. As we go to air, 23,000 people have been evacuated, over 500 homes destroyed, at least one person killed, with several still unaccounted for. CAL FIRE spokesman Dan Berlant, in an interview with CBS News, called these fires unprecedented.
What we're seeing here are extremely fast-moving wildfires with a little bit of wind, and the dry conditions, they have been enough to burn at explosive rates and to have unprecedented amount of acres burned in such a short amount of time.
8 firefighters have lost their own homes in the wildfires. Many residents said they barely escaped with their lives. California's state fire chief said these fires are spreading faster than they have ever seen in their careers, amid California's record drought and its hottest year on record so far.
We have to truck in water from other areas. Our helicopters may have to fly further to get water. This fire and many others that have burned this year have been very destructive, and there's no end in sight.
And a new study finds California's drought is the worst in 500 years. Researchers at the University of Arizona put the current drought into historical context. They said that based on data from tree rings, the current drought is the driest California has been in at least 500 years. That's including snowfall in the Sierra Nevada mountains last winter that hit its lowest level in 500 years. In other words, the data shows the state hasn't been this dry since the days of Christopher Columbus.
Yeah, but there's no consensus on that, says Fox.
On the political front, in our last episode, we reported on how the oil industry's deceptive $1 million ad campaign succeeded in killing off an ambitious provision in the California state legislature that would have cut the state's petroleum use. However, the oil industry could not kill the entire bill. California now has a new, official, legally binding goal of getting 50% of its electricity from renewable sources by 2030. The state is already halfway to that goal, and the legislation also sets a goal of doubling the energy efficiency of buildings with new incentives and revised building codes. Meanwhile, California Governor Jerry Brown said the battle with the oil industry has only intensified his resolve to ramp up California's leadership on climate change. On Monday, in a press conference about the wildfires, he said his climate change initiatives are not about burnishing his legacy, but about preparing for an uncertain future.
I wish if it were just about me, then it would be a very trivial problem. But it's really about you. And it's about your children, and it's about the future of how our society is going to function. And what we're seeing in Europe now with mass migrations, that will happen in California. As the Central America and Mexico, as they warm, people are going to get on the move. And it's a real challenge.
People are going to get on the move. If you think the right-wingers are upset about people coming into this country now, just wait until climate change really takes hold down there.
Finally, score one for the bees. In a major and almost unprecedented ruling, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals has overturned the Environmental Protection Agency's approval of an insecticide that is part of a class of pesticides known to harm bees. The three-judge panel reversed the EPA's unlimited approval of the chemical called sulfoxaflor, made by Dow Chemical. The justices said the EPA's permit was based on flawed and limited data. They noted initial testing showed it was toxic to bees. According to agriculture policy experts, courts almost never overturn the EPA.
And I thought the EPA hates business, has a war on coal, has a war on chemicals, has a war on everything that Fox News loves.
Depends on who you're talking to, I guess.
Apparently so. For much more on those stories and all of the other ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. You can download our reports anytime via iTunes or Stitcher or TuneIn. Find us and follow us on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
The most important issues of the day. This is the Rick Smith Show.
All right, the big news for today. Breaking huge news. Texas has not been taken over by President Obama. Jade Helm 15 evidently ended today. The 2-month-long invasion. Texas, wait a minute. Texas is still part of the U.S. Anyway, the big news is we haven't invaded Texas and taken it over, even though it's part of the U.S. And I got to tell you, I still love the insanity around that Obama's going to invade Texas and take it over. Just kind of nuts. I mean, look at Rand Paul and his statements on it. The governor of Texas, actually was very serious about it. You can go down the list of the crazies, the Ted Cruzes, the Gomerts, just bizarre stuff. Anyway, let's find out what's going on around the rest of the world and there in Washington, D.C. Bob Ney, Talk Radio News Service. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks, Rick. Now, by the way, as you know, the president's going to declare martial law the last month he's in office and remain president.
Okay.
So that's coming.
I'd heard rumors of that.
Right. Now, of course, as I tell people how I know that's false, Michelle Obama would just smack him from one end of the White House to the other. She wants out.
And look, I got to be honest with you. I'd want out too.
Yeah, his hair's all gray. I was looking at the poor president yesterday. I'm like, he's got he grayed, not naturally. He just grayed.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's what having that kind of a schedule and that kind of constant. And I think more than anyone, I think his presidency was really just bombarded with attack after attack after attack against them, to where every day was a new bit of nonsense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was constant, and I don't know. I even saw a picture on Facebook that made me shiver yesterday with him that somebody posted. Not one of my friends, but a friend of a friend, and I was like, "You got to be kidding me, putting that kind of stuff up there."
Yeah, I mean, it's scary times. I mean, I'm looking toward tomorrow night with the big debate, and your former party just really gone awry, I think.
Well, there's two things that I find very fascinating. Starting with Bernie Sanders for a second, he went to Liberty University. He did what I thought Bernie Sanders would do. He walked up, said, "I'm for gay marriage, I'm for reproductive rights, and here's where I think we might have some, agreements on." There was economics and things. A lot of people sat on their hands and didn't clap, but a lot of people didn't boo, and the whole point is he went.
Right.
First Democratic person I can ever remember in my political lifetime that went to Liberty University.
Teddy Kennedy.
Kennedy did?
Kennedy did back years and years and years ago. In fact,
okay.
It was one of those. I just read an article on it. That's how I know that Falwell had invited him to come, and he actually showed up and gave the speech. But other than Kennedy and Sanders, that's it. And no one made anyone show up. So when you saw the people in the crowd, those are people who wanted to be there, even if they didn't clap. When Ted Cruz went there, the university made it mandatory as part of their requirement to show up.
So Sanders went, and I think that's, thinking outside the box, and he's running this campaign doesn't have all the campaign workers and, on and on. So that's fascinating to watch. But you still got a low-key situation on the Democratic side, in the sense that you got Hillary Clinton, and she's stumbling with emails and some of the campaign statements that her campaign makes, and then you've got Bernie Sanders just steadily going up in some numbers, but you don't have a whole lot of fist fighting out there. All right, and then you go to the Republican side, and it's become one thing. It's all candidates versus Donald Trump. All candidates versus Donald Trump. Now, some are staying away from a little bit, like Kasich. Jeb Bush is having to get into it because he's at 6%. He's almost non-existent. If his name wasn't Bush, he'd be at the kiddie table tomorrow night. Yeah, he would. He'd be at the kiddie table.
And I'm okay with that.
Yeah, but he would be. And so you've got, and then Donald Trump is standing there yesterday, and he takes off after George Will, and he takes off after Karl Rove. Now, I'm standing there, watching this thinking, okay, does he just want to take everybody on, the Tea Party and everybody else under the sun? Then Wall Street announces today that they thought he would go away by now, and they're worried. So you're just seeing the biggest mix of political occurrences that I've ever seen, I know, in my lifetime. But tomorrow night's debate is going to be very defining, because I think it's going to be defining on who it eliminates.
Right. I mean, you've already seen Rick Perry step aside. Who else bails after that?
I mean, Huckabee better go apply for a job with Davis in Kentucky, because, he's going to be out of work. And then I think the two casualties tomorrow night, in my opinion, is the two casualties are going to be Chris Christie and Scott Walker. Those are the two. Now, of course, Walker came out with abolish the Labor Relations Board, et cetera, all the non-union
Which
stuff.
I'm not actually horribly against. It's the NLRB, while under the Obama years, has a couple of reasonable rulings. If you remember the George W. Bush years and you remember the Reagan years, they used the NLRB to bludgeon workers over the head. On the other side of it, I'm always a supporter of if we can't settle it at the bargaining table, we take it to the streets.
Well, you make a good point on that. Yeah, because the Fed stepped in. They've even stepped in on baseball strikes and things. So I think you've got this dynamic of, who doesn't survive tomorrow night. And then, of course, everybody's waiting to see what Carly Fiorina, she's building that up, and so is the mainstream media to build that as a great big Trump Fiorina fight. But Ted Cruz and others are going to scramble for their life. Rand Paul, he's been barking, he is going to take on Trump. He's had it, blah, blah, blah. And I thought, if you're going to say you're going to do something, you better do it.
Right.
I doubt he's got the juice to do it.
I mean, but at the end of this, any serious observer has to look at it and go, there's just no way Trump carries the party's nomination, right? I mean, it would really, I think, be the end of the party.
Well, it would be very fascinating. Some theorists in the Republican Party, I can tell you this, they look at it this way, that if Donald Trump is the nominee, I'm not saying they like him, but if Donald Trump is the nominee and Bernie Sanders is the nominee, it would be a close race, but Trump may win, depending on if Bernie Sanders could really, Bernie Sanders couldn't fire up the political machine,
Right.
Because he's never had a political machine.
Right, and you can red bait him.
Machine. If you hand that political machine to Bernie Sanders, wow.
Yeah, but you could also red bait Bernie, which I haven't seen, and I thought I would see more of to this point. Yeah. So
it's what I think Trump's done is he's finished off Jeb Bush, and he's opening this convention. One way or another, whether Trump's in that convention or not next year, I think it's an open convention. I've been feeling that for weeks.
Right, but they're gonna, whether it's him or not, they're gonna have to deal with all of the statements and all the things that he's moved the party on. I mean, you got to think they've lost the immigrant community, and there's just no way of getting that back. And with all of the comments against women, you got to think that they've lost a good number of them. And even the really creepy statements that he'd be dating his daughter if he wasn't his daughter. It's kind of a weird thing. I mean, all over I look at him and I go, just weird that he's leading the polls.
Well, people, I mean, I've talked to people that didn't like him, and now they say they're going to vote for him. And I asked them why, and always curious, and they just said that they're tired of, the hair-dried candidates. They're just tired of it, period. They don't care if he knows anything out. They're just tired.
Yeah. Okay. And I understand that. If you know you're going to get screwed over, you might as well at least have a good laugh along the way, which is kind of interesting. But on the other side of it, you look at Carson is rising in the polls as well, whom I think we only heard like 6 words out of in the last debate. So with his star rising, will he be someone that they go after tomorrow night as well?
Well, I don't think Trump will really go after him of sorts, but I think some of the others will. But it's hard to go after him because, I mean, look.
He's a nice guy.
I'm in business. You're in this business. You follow, what's going on. And I'm sorry, maybe I've been shirking my duty. I can't tell you anything about him. You know what I'm saying?
I know exactly what you're saying.
On abortion, and beyond that, I can't tell you much.
He hasn't done much of getting his message out there, whatever that is.
I don't know how you go after him if they, maybe as time goes on.
Maybe he's just less energetic, but it'll be interesting. Does anybody use the? I've been saying that the drinking game is how many times someone compares themselves to Ronald Reagan, since it's going to be at the Reagan Library.
Oh yeah, it's going to be at the Reagan Library, which is a beautiful setting, by the way.
I can't wait to go and see it. That's one of the places on my list. Not a big fan of Ronald Reagan myself, but it's on the list of places I would like to go and visit.
Well done, very, very well done place.
But the question is how many backflips and how much contortion do they do to compare themselves to Reagan?
Well, yes, I mean, because Reagan still remains within the Republican Party. The guy, I mean, I kind of had to laugh when somebody was complaining. Oh, Roger Stone, he's been a Republican consultant for 900 years. And he was on TV and he said, wait till they find out. You wait, he says, till they find out Donald Trump was a Democrat. And I was sitting there watching this guy, this dinosaur on TV, Rick, and I'm like, okay, Ronald Reagan was, and you know, they knew Donald Trump was a dinosaur when he went into Alabama at that rally. Guys like that, you know, Reagan is like, when they talk about that, you know, Reagan was a Democrat, and then he turned Republican, but he's still the icon of the Republican side, so they are in Republican territory.
So it should be fun to watch, if nothing else, just to see the backflips and the contortions and I gotta wonder how many, if everyone goes after Trump, which should be fun at least to see out of that. Let's move on. What's going on in the rest of the world? What's going on in Syria? I see some news out of there.
Well, the Russians are building a military camp. We're deciding, and there was a story on it of 5 options we potentially had, and option number 3, which nobody wants to really talk about, is that we support this evil guy Assad by leaving him alone. John McCain had the bright plan to train, and he talked the White House into this. Remember to train the moderates?
Yeah.
They trained 65. They found 65 people. And now, by the way, almost all 65 are gone, either dead or gone. Vanished. Can't find them, whatever.
Yeah, that's job training I don't think I'd have wanted, but go ahead.
Yeah, so the only options are, the fact that the Saudis want Assad gone and Russians don't want him gone. And if he goes, probably ISIS flies a flag above Damascus. Because today Al-Qaeda said, oh, yeah, we like ISIS now. We really don't trust them, but we're going to combine. The terrorists have all made up. And then you get the Syrian refugees, of which the kingdoms of Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Qatar will take not one single human being into their countries. And so you get all these refugees flying out of there and complete instability in Syria. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know if we can go in and, we're going to fight Russia, over them supporting Assad, who actually can wipe out ISIS?
Yeah.
I mean, are we really going to contemplate that?
No, I don't see that being the option, and I hope nobody pushes us into that.
I hope not. I mean, I was telling somebody the other day, this has the potential to snap your finger, and we're right back to the Cold War, and right back to building more armaments. And Halliburton would be doing cartwheels, building more armaments, and then you get troops near Russian troops, American troops, and somebody gets shot, and it's all over with.
And now we started World War III. I'm right there with you, Bob.
Not good.
Not good. Appreciate the news, man. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Rick.
All righty, Bob Ney, Talk Radio News Service. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
And I'll go to work at night. I got no time for living, yes, I'm working all the time. It seems to me I could live my life a lot better than I think I am. I guess that's why they call me the working man.
Making the blue blood see red. The Rick Smith Show.
Donnie Trump is said to be the goofiest presidential pretender in the GOP stable. But after all, he's a professional, made-for-TV stuntman, so his P.T. Barnum political shtick is no surprise. But the real surprise is that the flare-haired Donald is getting a serious challenge for goofiest of them all from an amateur practitioner of slapstick, Scott Walker. Only a few weeks ago, the political cognoscenti were hailing the sleepy-eyed Wisconsin governor as one of the, quote, serious candidates in the Republican herd. But he has since done so many splashy flip-flops on his policies that SeaWorld is reportedly trying to hire him to do backflips with Shamu. For example, he had previously been a quasi-sane Republican on the issue of citizenship for some undocumented immigrants. But when Trump surged to front-runner status as a flaming, maniacal immigrant basher, suddenly Scotty began foaming at the mouth like a mad dog, trying to outbash Donnie. Yes, he yapped, Trump is right that we need to build a big old hermetically sealed wall on the Mexican border, but he frantically exclaimed, we also need to build a wall across our northern border with Canada. Canada? Even Republicans hooted at such overwrought goofiness. As Rand Paul politely put it, that's a pretty dumb idea. So dumb that Governor Goofy collapsed into an addlepated heap of denial. I didn't say that at all, he barked a couple of days later. I've never talked about a wall to the north. Only he had. On Meet the Press, the national TV show. Walker was asked directly, do you want to build a wall north of here too? Rather than laugh it off, Walker declared with a straight face, that is a legitimate issue for us to look at. This is Jim Hightower saying, a 4,000-mile wall to protect us from friendly Canadians? Or maybe he wants to keep us from escaping to Canada if he becomes president. Walker is serious, all right. Seriously goofy.
What do the corporate powers from Wall Street to Walmart have in common? They hate the Hightower Lowdown. You can see why at www.hightowerlowdown.org.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
These are words you should have told the truth. Your life is real, and now we got the proof. Where you gonna run to? Where you gonna hide? You're running for the door now. You're getting out of line.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. If you missed any portion of the program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me here, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Interesting, the attacks, the arrows soon to be slung at the Donald. Tomorrow night, not the only arrows being thrown at him. The group Club for Growth Action. You may remember those people here in Pennsylvania. I'm sure know the name. Our senator, hopefully soon former Senator Pat Toomey, was their president for a number of years before beating Joe Sestak in 2010. The Club for Growth Action Super PAC, they have said that they are going to spend unlimited amounts of campaign cash to go after Trump. In fact, they're buying $1 million worth of attack ads to describe Trump as, quote unquote, too liberal and his policies contrary to conservative principles. I understand, Trump is doing well in the polls. I simply don't see how he's going to be the guy. But now going to be interesting to see where for a while, I think the party was going to say, okay, well, we'll let him go. We'll let him play. We'll pander to his ego. Because after all, when he bows out and the party comes to his senses, we're going to need his money. You can see how that plays out. But, I'm hearing people now no longer joking. And I never did. I mean, I have very little faith in the Republican electorate at this point, especially the super voters that come out during the primaries. I worry the crazy might throw him in there, which, wow, what does that say about us as a nation and what we think of our political system? Very, very, very interesting times. But anyway, again, if you missed any portion of the program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone there. And of course, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Tomorrow, I'm going to talk a little bit about voting, some actions going on in the Allentown School District you'll want to know about. Maybe we'll get a senatorial candidate to come on and talk to us about their run. Lots of good stuff. Thanks for being here. Look forward to seeing you back here tomorrow. Have a great night.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
It's covered.